Hello, everyone. This is Chris Schmidt, and we are here on Rocket Lasso Live. I gotta make sure the graphics correct because it's actually episode 18 of season 2. We've got a bunch of people hanging out on Twitch, a bunch of people hanging out on YouTube. Lots of questions are coming in already. So I see no reason not to jump in and tackle that right away. So let's begin. I'll scroll around. Let's start. I think last time we started on YouTube, so this time I'll start on Twitch. Mick has got a question about a roving eye, and to make sure to mute the audio. So actually, I'm going to turn off the audio overall, but let's try the link. Pause the video right away. Drag this onto the screen, and let's share the screen. So we got creepy procedural eyes opening up is the title. This is from Richard Lord. Oh God, it's got tryptophobia, which is always terrible, but let's see what we got here. Oh, I'm not getting any tryptophobia from this. Okay, when there's more than one eye, you get it. Oh man, look at those. That's super weird and creepy. Procedural eye opening up. Yeah, okay, the way these are moving around and everything. Man, super crazy. I wonder what they did to put these together. I don't know what software they're using, but it's not immediately jumping out. When the first, I thought this was a real lizard eye in the beginning until like 3 opened up. So, all right. Oh man, I'm trying to think of, like, there's obviously some live displacement going on. Oh boy, let me think. It's very cool, very detailed, and very photorealistic. I mean, I'm running at a crazy low resolution, but it looks great. Go a little bit higher on the resolution. Yeah, that looks really good. Yeah, it is disturbing, and it could be Houdini for sure. I'm trying to think of what I would do, because I'm assuming a lot of this has got to be based on materials. Now there are, I mean, and I'm going to use the vanilla cinema materials just for some quick tests. And I don't know that that's the best way to do it. And we're going to keep everything as simple as possible. So I'm going to work from a plane, and you could potentially, I just don't know. I mainly use Redshift now, and I just don't think there's much in the way of displacement of textures in Redshift. Maybe there is, and I just haven't like done it. Maybe you can mathematically do it, but I haven't needed to, so I haven't looked into it. But inside of vanilla cinema, there definitely are those types of things. So let's see if we can make the super basic version of it. So I'm going to make a material. We probably won't be able to see it unless we render, slightly unfortunately, but let's do most of our work in the displacement channel. Why not? So yeah, we got our material, we got some displacement. Let's set up a basic noise, and we need a decent number of subdivisions if we're going to be doing displacement. So let's try 100 by 100, which is not crazy for displacement. Apply the material, and let's see if we can get a little bit of real-time feedback, although I don't think the final effects will give real-time feedback. So I'm going to put a displacer as a child. The displacer is going to reference the displacement channel of this material. So now we can see a little bit of instant feedback in the displacement. And we probably do want the final displacement to happen. So this is just going to be a little preview for us to see it quickly. Because we'll probably do a little bit of sub-poly displacement. Yeah, for sure. Drop that down to maybe 3, do some round geometry. That should be a fine basic. Currently, this is 10, and that's 10, so they should be matching. That all seems good. So let's just get our basic noise going. The scale's a little small, so I'll increase it. And everything's running really quick, so I'm going to double our resolution. All right, so we've got all these little things going. Let's see if we can get something that's a little bit more organic. I think some of the Voronoi-based shaders are really good for this type of thing. So you can do Voronoi 3. Voronoi 1 has these really nice kind of bubble type marks. Now, it's going to look backwards here, but if we invert the shader, you get this very kind of almost like scaly look, which I think can be pretty neat. Looks a little bit animal and organic. And I've been playing with Substance a little bit more lately, and it's definitely made me realize how important the mode of lighten is, which is not something I typically use too much of. I'm gonna make a second pattern here with a different noise, and let's make it actually I'll make it smaller. We'll make it maybe 95. So see, here's a smaller version of the pattern, and if we go up to this layer and look how they're combining, I would always screen things, but instead I'm going to lighten them, and you can see the visual of how they lighten, but kind of is a really nice way of these combining. So you get kind of the best of both worlds, and we can layer things up in different ways. We can make this one maybe not quite so powerful because it's smaller, and we can maybe end up with something that feels a little bit more organic. You know, I still feel like we can increase our resolution because we're working in such a simple setup. So we can do that. Now, these are peaking a little bit sharp for me. So let's see if we can fix that a little bit by, will this acknowledge if we create a colorize here? And I typically don't like using the colorize like this because you can't copy it. It does work though. So actually that already seems to have taken the edge off a little bit. But if we just pull our middle knot to the side, you see it's going to kind of emphasize the brighter points, and it's going to kind of round the top off a little bit. And then we end up with more of this layered landscape type look. We could pull up the black area and create like some lowlands, like some flat areas if we were inclined, but I don't think we need to. And there's lots of different shaders and materials, but it's just, okay, so let's just call this our base. That's going to be kind of the basic material that we're going to manipulate on top of it. Now we added so many subdivisions. I don't think this needs to go too far. I'm going to drop our sub poly to 2. And we have to make sure when we render that we actually turn off this displacer because we don't need that one in real time. It's just giving us this feedback nicely here. Now we will see how far we can push this, but I'm pretty sure the step we're about to do is what's going to break it. So I'm going to save it. And let's go into episode 18 scene files. I should mention that if you are following on Patreon, you get access to all of these scene files when I post the episode, and you get early access to all the videos and early access to some super tutorial stuff. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Where do we? I don't even know. We're going to I don't even know what to call it. Displacement with eyeballs. You can't think of a good name, just be very descriptive. Okay, so here's my thought. We've got all this material stuff going on. There's 2 different types of displacement in Cinema. There is the one inside the layer shader, so this one called Distort, but this one is just different 3D noises, and actually it does update in the viewport, which I'm kind of impressed by. So we could use this one and use different types of noises and displace these, and we can see the preview actually is doing a pretty good job where they become, well, they're going to become stretched out, so we can keep on making the strength a little bit stronger. You can see it's going to displace that material in interesting ways. Our resolution isn't so high that we can push this too far, but you see all these nice little swirls and everything. Now, that's not to say that's making it look more like Critter, but it's kind of a neat thing. I mean, yeah, even look at some of these. I wish I could make that, show up bigger, but that's as big as we can get. But you see, look at these really nice swirls and everything. So I don't know if it's doing us much good, but it's why we love our Cinema 4D noises, as they combine in so many crazy cool ways. So that's one way, but these can only be, this type of this distort can only be driven via the noises. So it's kind of built in. There's a different type of distort, which we have to take our entire layer, and I'm going to feed it inside of a distorter. So inside of this distorter, we can now distort it via any other shader that we want to feed it. So we could make another noise. I'm curious. Actually, it does seem to update in the viewport, but I think the Proximal is going to break it, because our next step is we need to displace it based on some sort of fall off. And the best way to get fall off here would be to use a proximal. So proximals don't work. It might show something in the center, so don't get fooled, because it's fooled me a lot. So let's just make it instead of, the best way to explain it is to make it. So I'm going to create a proximal, and the proximal is going to actually, what's the best way to show this? I'm going to temporarily store all of that fun stuff that we made inside of the alpha channel. You can just drag it over, and now I can focus on just our proximal and see if it's doing anything. So with this proximal, I'm going to feed it an object. The object will be the sphere. And now you will see, boom, we are getting something with some feedback in the viewport. The problem is going to be that it doesn't know how to calculate that in real time. It's actually, okay, well, I didn't think it would work, but it is working. Maybe either they updated or the situation's slightly different, because in the past, I don't think I could move the sphere around and we'd get real-time updating, but we do seem to be getting real-time updating. So that's good. Now, let's play with the proximal a little bit. Let's make it smooth, so it's going to transition more smoothly into that shape. We have a start distance and an end distance, so it's pretty big right now. Also, just think of these as units. This is an end distance of 100 units radius. So I want to see it a little more blatantly, so let's jump the min up to 50, and essentially I want that to start right where the eye is. So we'll pull that in, something like that. And I'm going to pull this one in a little bit. So now you can see that this is, distorting based on, this is going to distort via the proximal. Actually, I didn't even think of that. Somebody saying vertex and fields. We've been doing a lot of stuff with vertex and fields, and that's actually a that'd be better to do it that way. We just done all this, and it would be better to do it with vertex and fields. I immediately jumped to we need distortion, but I can't really we could kind of do some distortion with fields. I'm trying to think if it's worth. Well, let's just spend another couple minutes on this, and then we'll jump to the other method, because let's see this one through a little bit and see if we can get anything interesting. So now we have a proximal that is shaped correctly, and we can treat that like a mask. I don't want to lose it, so I'm going to copy it. And let's drag our temporarily stored alpha into our displacement. Put that back into a distorter. And in the distorter, we can feed the proximal. And now I'm not seeing any effect right away, but let's increase. Okay, it is there. Wow, I can't believe this is updating in the viewport. Or maybe they made some changes so that I can do it. They did do a lot of updates in the viewport. So now you can see that we are distorting just based on that shape by itself. So with that kind of thing in mind, we could grab this, and you'll see as I move it that we are distorting the material as we pass through it. Might be a good idea to even put the radius back bigger. So if we got to go easy, I will make it bigger, but not too much bigger. So it actually has more room to distort from one spot to the other. So yeah, seeing this in the viewport is crazy. So now you can see that we do get this kind of just fun random distortion happening as we travel. Now there are different modes inside of this. This is set to directional. Directional tends to make it so it's like, okay, this is here. So it's pushing on Y, it's pushing on X, it's pushing on Z. But that tends to push it only in one orientation. So a good method is changing this to bidirectional. So it actually pushes it in both directions. Visually, I think it's actually kind of worse. I kind of liked it off of it. And there's also a flow field, which I don't have too much of an understanding of. And in the viewport, it is doing something, but not much. So our best visual feedback right now is in directional. And that seems to be doing a fine job, better than I thought it would. So that's pretty cool. And if that was like supposed to be revealing the eyeball, then we might be able to, you can even see here that there could be nothing. And as I push this up, it's going to distort. Now you see how everything looks like it's moving along X as it moves up. You see it's distorting off to the left. So that's where I'm talking about on the directional. It might work better on a bidirectional, where it's not going to feel so much like it's traveling in one direction. But yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not going to worry about that for now. But what I would like to do is, let's say, okay, if it's down, we have full power, and as this moves up, it is distorting it all over the place. But I think it'd be kind of nice if the entire thing faded away. So it's kind of like nice and clean and smooth on that very lip right around it, or even possibly pushing it down. So let's copy this proximal. And I mean, it's all about distortion there, but if this entire thing goes into another layer shader, and this is obviously where nodes would come in useful, and there is nodes now, but not in this instance. But now everything that we just did is inside that distorter, and we're inside a proximal, so we can set that to screen. Yeah, so we set that to screen. Now that all becomes white, and you see it eventually becomes nice and smooth. And this is completely unrelated proximal, so I can go and change the radius a little bit and move it and make it kind of whatever we want. Now, I think it'd be nice if this was actually lower. So instead of this screening the shape, why don't we make it a mask? So we could invert it, but I'm going to create a color, and that pushes everything, I think, up. So I'm going to make this black. And now we shall use this proximal. Instead of screening, we'll use it as a layer mask. And now you can see that we are masking whatever this blackness is, which is wherever white is, it shows whatever this is, which is black, and then transitioning into the distorter. So now we should get a fun combination of these distorting and then eventually smoothing out as the eyeball pops up. Once again, we have complete control over the radius just by changing this fall off. So I can pull that in a little bit so we get this nice curvature. Let's do an inner radius, which is right on there. And I could decrease this so that becomes tighter. So it's just going to be kind of just perfectly line up a little bit on the outside of the eyeball. We have a lot of options we could do there. It could actually, let's see how far we can push this. Because if we use I'm going to copy it just by dragging it. It automatically makes a copy if you grab the image. So now you can see that's pushing upward. And if I I guess if we lowered this, then that could become a, yeah, that can become a second layer. So I can screen. So that can, yeah, that will screen, and we need to adjust this. I'm going to increase that radius a little bit, and you're going to see, hopefully, yeah. So I'm going to end up with this flatter section a little bit on the outside, and then it will transition into that really deep pit. So that could actually screen on top of it. Alternatively, we could multiply, which is going to push everything else down, but we can multiply by not too much, just like 50%. And now you can see this will actually climb up higher, everything else is lower. And thus, in our displacer, we could double the height because we essentially just cut everything in half. So now those are back at full power, and these will go double the height and eventually calm down and go lower. So you have a lot of very direct control over exactly how that layout will happen. Personally, I visually like the way it looked a little bit earlier, but just to show you, this can go and push up, and you can see this really great reaction. And we're even seeing it in the viewport here, just based on that material. So that's doing a very nice job. I'm impressed. That's better than I thought we'd be able to do on this. And just for clarity, if we make a second sphere and I drag this over, the only thing that's a pain is we have to do it manually. I wonder if we could do it once. Would a fracture object acknowledge it? I don't know. Polygons would. That would connect. Yeah, it's object based. It'd be a vertex. There's ways we could work around it, but we have to go inside of every proximal and drag in the sphere again. And there's just no way around that. Now, if we were doing something layer based, then there's potentially ways of getting around that. But right now we'd have to manually drag that in. Now so now the point being is you could go and do that as many times as you want. And each of these is independent. Like we have as many of these little eyeballs pop up and merge in and do whatever we want them to. So that could be really fun and weird and creepy. Even along those lines, just for fun, let's make an old school meta ball. I know volumes have kind of taken over, but we can make a meta ball and decrease the setting here. And so now we could even get this fun, these are blobby things, so it's like nothing, and then and it raises up, and then these can blob into each other. So there's a lot of fun, I think, to be had even just on this basic material based version of the setup. And I mean, I thought we were gonna have to render, but we didn't. So just for fun, everything's running so quickly. I'll jump this out to 500 by 500. Now you can see the extra detail and how nicely everything seems to be reacting. I'm impressed. I didn't think that the materials would get us as far as they did. All right, so, and actually this, for what it was, I think that this was fine. This was doing a good job. And Proximal, there are some additional tricks with Proximal. I don't think this is the time to talk about them, but we could potentially, these wouldn't be spheres, they would be clones, and the clones would be polygons, and the radius of the polygon could drive the radius of the shape, and then we could drive the entire thing with a cloner, so we wouldn't have to keep dragging them in again and again. We would just change the contents of the cloner, and that would change the contents of what we're feeding into the proximal. So there are more things you could do along those lines. Let's wiggle this around just a little bit more. And now, I mean, I'm very happy with that. That's really fun. Super weird too. Yeah, I'll just give that a save since everything worked. Now, let's see if we can do a slightly different version using all the new field stuff. I think one of the problems is I don't think it's actually going to work as well for us in some ways. We're going to be able to do certain things we couldn't do otherwise, but it's not going to work for us in other ways because I don't think that, let's turn those off. I don't think it's going to enable us to do this in anywhere near as much real time, because that was a very simple displacement. Because if we want to maintain that same resolution, I'm going to make a copy of my plane. If we want this 500 by 500, I bet this vertex map that we're going to need to create is going to slow us down quite a bit. But, we can't know for sure, so let's go ahead and just do it. I mean, do we need a vertex map? I think a vertex map is the best way to go. So we can create a vertex map. You see that's going to colorize everything, and we can turn on use fields, and now this is going to be field-based. I guess we're going to just see it via the displacement, so we don't need to see the vertex map. And because we're only pushing this up and down, we can use a plane deformer. I can use a plane, a plane effector, and use it like a deformer, because I'm going to say that this deformer should, this plane effector under deformer, the deformation should be based on the points. And now it's going to behave like it's going to behave just like a displacer facing in one direction. And actually, I kind of recently realized that there's a lot of power potential inside of using these as deformers, more than I thought there was. I'm not sure when I'll be able to implement that somewhere, but it's true. Now, this plane, we can feed it a fall off, and the fall off will just be based on this vertex map. So whatever this vertex map says is whatever the rest of the scene will do. Now, currently, we're not feeding it anything specific, so we shall start feeding it the vertex map, feeding it whatever we want fall off wise. So let's begin with a nice simple spherical field. And now we got a spherical field, and I think that I would just make it a child of the sphere. So I can make this a child of the sphere. We don't need both spheres right now, so I'll just make a child over there. It doesn't actually have to be a child of what we have live here. Now we are seeing this live. I don't actually want to see, I want this field, but I don't want to have the vertex map selected because I just want to see it in the viewport. So let's see how quickly this is updating for us. I imagine, yeah, you see it's a lot slower because we're kind of going through this intermediary of the spherical, of the vertex map, and that could slow us down quite a bit. And it could just be slower in general, but let's play around with it a little bit and see what kind of controls we get. Now, we have a lot of things that are really good. I mean, we get a lot of advantages using this workflow because, first of all, we get these interactive controls, so I can pull this and place the radiuses wherever I want to. And then we have very, very clean control over how this is falling off. We're going to remapping, and then we can give it a full range of remapping from one to the other. In fact, oh, actually, no, I don't want to do that. I already had that correct. But what we do want to do is change the contour to be something like curve. If we use curve, then now I can use this and perfectly reshape the shape of the edge, which is less of a kind of guess than what we were doing before. And you can see how quickly I can reshape this. You see, look how easy and clean it was to make this kind of little cavity shape. So boom, pretty powerful along those lines. And then let's get some noise in here. I'm going to save this as a new version. Displacement with eyeballs with fields. Yeah, I see there's lots of chat going on, but it's mostly new questions. But thanks for hanging out, everybody. Thanks, and I'll see how many questions we can get to. But we got fun things to cover right now. So, okay, spherical field, good. Back into the vertex map. I want to affect, let's add some noise. So really straightforward. We can create a noise field. And now we get a noise field appearing everywhere. This can be all those same patterns because it's based on a noise. So we can click on Perlin noise, and we have all the different presets. So we could once again go to one of our Voronoi. We go to something like this, so we get something a little bit more scaly, which is kind of fun. I like that. And let's make a second one. So we're going to kind of remake some of the ideas we did before. So we'll make a second field. This one will have the same noise, but it'll be larger, 200%, and we'll randomize the seed a little bit. And let's make sure we are feeding it in. And this one, like I said, we'll do normal and then lighten. Or I guess it's not called lighten here. It'd be called max. So yeah, now it's taking the brightest value from both, and you can see those get layered up. This one's actually a little powerful again, so I'll pull that down. So now you can see we get tiny ones and bigger ones. Just kind of like, I like that mix of them. It makes for like, we can make big rocks and smaller pebbles type of thing. Okay, excellent. And now those are working. So let's move our spherical field up to the top. And how do we want this to interact with everything? Well, in very similar ways. First of all, we could overlay, and I can see that there's definitely a little bit of an effect on that, and everything else getting pushed down. But I think better would be kind of what we were doing before. We could use it as a mask of some sort, or we can do something like multiply. So now everything's getting squished down to almost nothing. We could screen, or let's add. So now that will push upward and peak. Currently, everything's getting clamped. I'm going to turn off clamping so things can push up potentially beyond that point. Maybe not. It might not be able to, maybe the plane. Oh, that's being, okay, this is also clamping. So we have to unclamp both of those. Yeah, and now you can see those can actually push up even higher. So now you can see that we are able to do the same type of setup on all of these. Now, actually, one of the things I thought we were going to get from vertex maps, now that I think about it a little bit more, maybe we don't get it for free from vertex maps. I was thinking we might be able to get some sort of a twisting effect, but maybe we don't, because we can't distort these noises below. That actually doesn't do anything. So yeah, maybe it's not as fancy along those lines as I had been originally thinking. But we can still push things a little bit further. You see how we're layering this up, and we could, one of the advantages we automatically get with this. In fact, why don't we, let me think, what's the best way to do this? It'll be a little bit, it might move in some ways I don't want it to, but I'm going to create a vertex map. This actually be a really good use for Signal, but because I share the scene files, I try and avoid using plugins. In a normal circumstance, I would just use Signal because this is a very good place to use it. But I'm just going to randomize the motion of this 400 by 400. And this should be able to wiggle around a bunch on position, not too quickly. And let's hit play. And now it's going to move around. And it should move. Oh, I didn't give it any height, so we can give it some height. This is where it might get a little bit weird. It's going to move up out of it, but it's also going to move down. So you can see we're getting kind of that effect. And it does submerge. And then it'll move up again. So what I'm thinking is, come on up. There we go. So now it's going to pop up. But now that we're using fields, we could do things like create the, we can create a decay. So if I put a decay on here, it's looking at the maximum, and then we can give it some more power, and it's going to remember where it travels through. So we're going to see it can leave a trail of like extra distortion behind it that will slow. You can see right there, it's slowly fading away. So that's a nice little extra bit of detail we can get from this that we couldn't get otherwise, or not easily get otherwise. I don't need that right now. The next little thing, what's a frame where that is pretty good? About frame 5. I would really like to spend just a moment and see if we get that twisting effect a little bit. But honestly, the only way I can, I always forget, like, what's the way of doing twisting? It's not using I didn't think it's using a twist. But maybe it is. I don't know. Well, let's just try. I'm going to create a twist. I'm going to make a child of the sphere, reset PSR just so I can get the proper position. And now I'm going to make it a child of the plane. And then I'm going to right click and say, I want this to have a rigging tag, a constraint tag. And this constraint tag is going to match the PSR, the position, scale, and rotation. I just want the position actually of the spherical, or the sphere that we're chasing. So now it's going to move wherever the sphere goes. So now we get this big old twist. Yeah, this is not going to work. This is not how you do it, because the twist doesn't work that way. Let me think. I do this all the time. You would think that we could take this twist and I could just crank up the power. Let's do 360. But it's not really going to do, well, first of all, it's going to be applying the power everywhere, but twists everything around. And then the next thought would be like, okay, cool, we'll give it the spherical field fall off. We'll do that. So now it's only affecting that one spot, but that's not the way the twist works. It doesn't twist around horizontally. It doesn't do that kind of spiral. What it does do is it twists things as it travels upward. And I do that every time. Travis, I'm not sure I'm following. It might be a bend. I don't even know if I'm trying to think. I'm trying to remember what the usual way I would do this is. I don't think it's a bend either. It would be, it's more like an FFD or something. But dang it, seriously, I do this all the time and I forget all the time. It's like, wait a minute, what was it that I did? Because there's really good methods to do it, but you got to twist in the spiral, and nothing here is giving an obvious spiral. Yeah, it's almost more like I would use like a joint, but you can't move a joint around. That doesn't work. You could do a joint with a, trickier than I thought it would be. I'm going to do the same thing. I move the FFD in, see if it works. I'm going to make an FFD, and we'll try and make this as visual as possible. If we go to the top view, I'm going to, we don't need height segments, but we do need more of these other ones. I don't want to go overboard. If we just see a little bit of it, I'd be happy. So let's do 5 by 5. And the thought, now I guess we need to do 6 by 6. Otherwise, that's pointless point. Yeah, now we got a layer and a layer. I don't know if this will work, but the thought is if we select all of these and we hit R for rotate, let's look at it in the viewport. If I spin these, then you see how that's going to twist. This is going to twist around, which is more the effect that we're going for. Now I made this way too big. We should be going a little bit more on the scale. But do you see why the twist deformer doesn't do it? And we need something more like an FFD. Now, is the FFD actually the one we want to use? I don't know. There might be a better way. I'm blanking on the way I've done it in the past, but this is a way of doing it. So we've got all these middle ones selected. I'm going to spin it to some reasonable degree. And then let's select the inner one again, or a smaller inner one. And now we can twist that one a little bit more. And this one's actually doing a fine job already of twisting. So I thought we'd need some sort of fall off, and we can go into, actually these don't, you cannot do a fall off with a FFD, I forgot. Yeah, but it's already kind of doing the job. So yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, there's different shapes we could do. Like some people are shouting out like using a helix, a formula effector. I'm trying to remember what the original way I did. What would you use the helix? What would the helix be driven by? Like, yes, we could push things up, but I want to take what's already existing and twist it. That's the trick. But if I were to grab this and move it, you can see that we're going to get this twisting motion. It's definitely a little bit weird, especially since we're not getting a fall off. And the FFD is one of the few things that doesn't get a fall off. So we might have needed to leave a second ring of points. I wish I could remember. I really do wish I could remember the method I've done for that, because there's we have to deform the existing points. It has to be a separate thing. We can't use a field directly inside of the same plane effector that we've been using, because that just won't do anything. Like, yeah, we can create kind of a visual spiral, but it wouldn't be deforming the existing geometry. It would be a new geometry, which, maybe stylistically that could work. I'm going to temporarily turn off the FFD and just show you, because we could make spirally shapes. I mean, that's simple enough. A spirally type shape we could just make would be a helix. I'll do the same trick again. We'll make it a child of the plane, copy this PSR to it. Luckily we didn't, well, I can aim this flat on the ground. It's getting a little hard to see some of these things, so I'm going to, I guess we're still using this material. We just don't need it to have all of this stuff inside. Clear. I'm just gonna make this have a little bit of color to it, so we can see some lines on top of it. That's actually displaced. We don't need to actually inside there. Too big, T for scale. Scale it down until it's approximately, I want it to be relatively small like that. And then it should have a height of 0. So it's gonna be very flat. We're not gonna see it very clearly. I'll temporarily turn off the ground. You see we've got this flat circle, but if we start decreasing the radius, then we can start creating a spiral shape. So yeah, you can do that. Gotta be careful, my mouse just twitched, so it suddenly shot inward. We gotta get the proper radius so we get as much of a spiral out of it as we can. But you see, it starts turning into like, okay, that's a spiral, but that's not going to feel too much like a spiral. So we actually need to rotate it a lot less, say like 90 degrees, so we get something like that. And then we need to clone it a bunch of times. So I can hold down Alt as I create a cloner. Let's make that what gets centered. And that becomes a radial with a radius of 0. And now you can see we can start making more of these, and you're going to get kind of more of a spirally shape. That, that can be fine. This is too many because we won't be able to visually see it. So you end up with this kind of thing. And then inside of the plane, we could feed this in as a piece of geometry. There's a good chance it's not going to accept the cloner. Actually, it should go into the vertex map. So let's take a look at this again. We can, I want to see it very clearly, so I'm going to turn everything off. That's interesting. I turned everything off and it's still showing something. Whoop, it's being weird. Why are you remembering? There's no reason for this to be remembering. Well, okay, it's remembering. There's some sort of refresh issue happening. But we run into that before. Okay, so I'm going to drop in this as if it brings us a spline object. Okay, cool. So it came in as a spline object. It's actually working pretty well by default. And you can see we get this kind of neat spiral. But keep in mind, this is not deforming. This is the top result. Oh my goodness. I must have said something that triggered Google. Oh no, don't bring up Spore. MW is talking about it. It looks like the Spore logo, which I don't specifically remember. I just remember Spore was the most disappointing game ever made for me. The promise did not live up to the hype. Okay, so we got a spherical thing, and you get this twist. Now, like I said, keep in mind, it's not actually doing anything terribly useful for us. Can we invert it like that? No, apparently not. But we can probably go into remapping and invert that. Yeah, so we can get this kind of spiral, which is kind of neat. That's neat looking. It's not going to deform existing geometry. We can just add on top of it. So even though that's shooting way out, so we'd probably want to mask it somehow. Or is there, yeah, it's currently going along. Originally it's going to do a radius, but I kind of like this along. Let's try the radius. So I'm going to say I want a radius. And now you see that we actually get this little radius tracing around the individual shapes. And we can feed that the power of this radius. We can also do the radius fall off. Does that make sense? I'm not sure where this goes. 2 points, please. Yeah, that doesn't work the way I've tinkered with that, and it doesn't work the way I expect it to. Maybe it does, maybe it does. Actually, it does seem to kind of do what I was thinking it would. It's just way too subtle. Well, just it was kind of an accident, but let's go back to along just because it looks cool. Now it's not terminating. So it's looking at the spline and then casting out to forever for it. So it's a cool looking shape. But if we want to limit that, then we should probably multiply it by the spherical field. So we'll drag the spherical field again. Actually, we can mask it. So let's create a mask, drag in the spherical field. And there we go. Now you can see the spiral happening just at that spot. So it's neat. I like the look of it. It's just not deforming existing information. But I guess we can just turn on some of these other layers. That's now masked. So we can turn on. And that's a spiral on top of it. And I mean, is the end result going to make a cool looking spiral? Yeah. So like, is it good enough? Depending on what you're doing. Yeah, possibly. So we can do something like this. And those will add together pretty nicely. And yeah, it just feeds through here. We could do some sort of smoothing. Right now, there's not much of a transition. You would want to blur those somehow. We could do it via transferring vertex maps and whatnot, but let's not worry about that. And I'm going to temporarily, what's the best way to do this? I'll just create a null, pull off our vibration tag so I can take control of it. And now we can, again, I can push this down. Now you see, actually, it's not going to spiral there. It's just a spiral that follows it around, which is also an interesting detail. Wherever this goes is going to create the spiral, and seeing the spiral at full power even as we move it away. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting details there. Now we could be spinning that. It could be animated to do its own thing, but it's just a static spiral that's moving around with our eye. So like that's not doing everything I want it to, but it's pretty neat. There's a lot more to explore here, and I got to think about it. If I do remember, if I do end up remembering how to do the twisting deformation that I'm thinking, I will write it down so I don't forget again. So I'm going to, yeah, let's just wrap this one up. I mean, there's a lot of neat things here. You know, we did get it working pretty well. I think visually it looked a little bit cooler when we didn't have that, just because it's interactively changing. We can kind of see this morphing a little bit. It would be, yeah, we'd have to do displacement. Yeah, there just isn't a way of sampling where the noise field is getting its information. I have to think about it, but I am intrigued. There might be more to do on that. Okay. Hi everybody. Okay, now I said the second one I'm going to do is we got to tackle this special separate thing, and then we'll jump back in and try and do some more textures. But I was really intrigued by this, and I've never really seen anybody talk about it or ask about it, and I thought it was kind of neat. So we can go and tinker with it a little bit. Let's see, just to continue with what MW was talking about. Yeah, I was a little older when it came out. What was disappointing about the video game Spore is I remember it had the most amazing tech demo I'd ever seen, which was like, oh, we start out as like an amoeba, and then you get stronger as an amoeba, and then kind of the way they said is like, oh, you do this, and then a bunch of time passes, and now you have become like this little critter that crawls up on land, or you become a fish. It's like, oh, now you've done that. After a while, eventually, after a lot of time, you will turn into this critter that walks on the land, and then eventually you turn into like, you know, you evolve and you evolve and you evolve, and then you become a tribe, and then you become a space-faring civilization. And it was like they were kind of promising it as this perfect transition from one to the next to the next. And it was like a total lie, or they ran out of time because it was like, oh, there's an amoeba part of the game. And when you're all done with that amoeba part of the game, you just boom, hit a checkbox, and now you're playing the fish part of the game. And then you hit a checkbox, and then now you're playing you're walking on land part of the game. And there was no actual evolution going on, and that's what they promised. So man, that super annoyed me. Oh yeah, they just cut the fish part, but it wasn't so much that parts were cut. It's that they didn't do a smooth transition from one to the next, and that's what we were promised. Anyway, okay, let me set up what we're going to tackle here. I got a question, and this is from Leslie, and she works in the Laboratory of Molecular Biology at Cambridge. Essentially, there's going to be, they're doing, I can't get specific on the kind of work that they're doing, but let's just say they're doing body scans, and then from the body scans, they're getting information, and the information that they're getting is being spit out into spreadsheets. And it says, essentially, it's a question of how do we get information from a spreadsheet into an animation inside of Cinema? How do we visualize data in some way? And honestly, I've never tackled anything along these lines. I did a tiny little bit of research and I started tinkering. So let's see if we can figure this out a little bit. And some of this we're going to be making up as we go. And we're not going to be, essentially, we're just tackling some of the ideas. This is not supposed to be comprehensive, but I do want to tackle this. And I know... let's see. I'm trying to think of what's the best way to go about showing some of this, because we're going to be spending some time. You probably never ever would have guessed it, but we're going to be spending some time in spreadsheets. So I bet you never thought we'd do that in Rocket Lasso Live, but it's worth it. I think there's some fun stuff we can do here. Now, sorry, I got to find the proper window. Let me open it up, and I'm gonna find it on the proper screen because I'm gonna be going into like Google Sheets. I just want I've got like invoices and stuff in there, so I'm gonna make sure I'm only popping up the proper window. So if you'll indulge me for just a moment, I think we'll be able to get some cool info from this. Okay, so I need to go into, let's do it, Google Drive, and then download this into Google Drive. And there it is. And now open, please. Open with Google Sheets. Now, what's really cool, okay, I got this. So I can pull this over, I think. So here's what's cool is I didn't build this. This is like, this is just some raw information that you could get from a client or some we don't know what we need to do with it. So it's like, okay, well, here's what we get. Now I know there's some extra detail that could be super relevant. And to tell you the truth, I didn't necessarily fully understand the question all the way, but the part that I do know for sure is we got 2 bits of information. We've got a frame. So if something happens at these frames, and at these frames, we want something to be a very particular color. So we've got hex codes of color. So let's just limit our scope of what we're doing to this. So we have a time and a color. At that time, something should be that color. Cool. We can work from that. Now, we're going to be using some Xpresso in here, but I don't know of any good way of... We can't convert hex in Cinema. We'd have to write Python code. I don't want to write Python code. So we're actually going to spend a little bit of time here in the spreadsheet and make it do the math for us in the spreadsheet. So I am not, I have tinkered around before with spreadsheets to do things. I actually was building this really advanced treasure generator for a D&D game. And so I did spend a lot of time, but I've completely forgotten all of it. So I just spent a lot of time Googling and figuring out the different things. So we need to, I'll just show you this. If I'm trying to figure this out from scratch, I'll show you the exact process that I'm doing. So the first thing we need to do is let's see if we can convert. I want to do, let's just type in the word sheets. Actually, you can already see here, it's autofilling with my search from yesterday. I want to do in Google Sheets, convert hex to RGB. So let's go ahead and just do a search and see what we get. And in Stack Overflow, somebody was asking about how to do this. And different people are answering different things. Is there a proper answer here? Yes, look, here's a great one. So they're saying that there's a function called hex to decimal, but they are actually breaking this apart into multiple things. So they're taking, it looks like what they're doing right here, this very helpful person Vityata answered that question. And what they're doing is they're taking the hex code and they're chopping out one of the letters and then two of the letters and then the other two of the letters maybe, and then feeding it to the hex, hex to decimal multiple times. Okay. But we actually need to split this out into R and G and B separately because that's what Cinema will be able to read. We can force it to read that. But, well, actually, let's go ahead and do the first part here. So what we could do is just copy this entire thing. And let's do some spreadsheets. So in here, we need to do some math. If you click on one of these, you can type in the equation. So I'm going to click up here to do the equation. So I can do something like type in equals. And this is right here. This is box F3. So I could type in equals F3. And now this is going to show whatever that shows. Okay, fair enough. I'm actually going to skip over one box because I know we're going to need it in between one. So I'm going to jump over here. And let's just paste in that equation. Now, I know we're in Sheets, but they share like all the same code. So if I do that, it's going to say, it's going to output three numbers with dashes, but it says 0, 0, 0. It's like, well, what's going on? Why isn't this working? Well, the reason this isn't working is because it's not expecting this, this number, this pound sign. It's not expecting that. It wants that to be gone. So, okay, we need to get this information without the pound sign. So let's just go ahead and Google that. I want to, in Sheets, remove first character. So here we go. If you want them to remove it, minus it, we can say right B2 length 1 minus. It's like, okay, I'm not even going to click on the window. Let's just copy that. There's some nice information there. So let's go back into our sheet. I'm going to type this in on the equation. So equals right, and it's saying B2, but we know we're referencing F3. So let's change that to F3. F3, and let's see what our result is. Look at that. This is now, that equation is taking, it's looking at a cell and then removing a letter from the right, or it's taking everything from the right. Well, the point being is all I did was Google, how do I get rid of the first character? And I found something useful and I cut it out. And now you can see I have a cell that is giving us the hex value without the pound sign. So now let's grab this equation that we are working from, and I'm going to tell that to reference G3. So let's type in G3. I'm going to copy that, paste G3, paste G3, and look at that. We are now getting 4, 35, 255. Those look more like Cinema 4D numbers, but like I said, we can't read all three of those very easily. So let's split those out into separate parts. So I'm honestly, just because we're showing our work here, let's go ahead and just copy our equation. I'm going to say copy that, and let's jump to the next line and let's paste it in, and let's just try and isolate part of this. So right here, you can see it's saying like reference something. It's doing something and then saying and it's kind of like, okay, and then combine with. So I'm just going to delete everything after the and. Delete that, and let's see what we get. Oh, look, we just get the first number. We get 4. Excellent. So let's jump to the next one. I'm going to say equals. So we know everything before this and we don't need. And then we can see and it's adding this dash, and then and doing the equation. So let's get rid of everything before that, leave the equals. And let's get rid of everything after the and. And now we get the second number. And let's do it just one last time. Paste it in, and all we need is everything after the final and. Let's do equals that. Now we got, yes, I click. Okay, I messed up. I think I misclicked somewhere, so it started trying to type in a number for me. Okay, stop it. Whatever it's doing, just click, 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 click. Okay. This one keeps trying to update. I'm going to delete, 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 delete. Type in H. Enter. There. It was, I don't know what I did wrong. But now you can see I've actually separated these out into 3 separate numbers. Now, just because I know for a fact it's going to be the case, there's actually, we're going to import this in the Cinema, and there's a function in Cinema that it will look at the first column, the very first column, as the frame. So let's go ahead and move this frame information to be the first one. So I can just grab the column D and drag it over, and it'll become the first column. So that becomes the frame. I also know that in Cinema, it wants the information to start on either line 1 or line 2. So currently there's 2 empty ones. So let's just fix that as well. I'm going to right click on row 1. I'm going to say delete row. So now we've got 1 row of information, and then the next row is going to begin spitting out our details. Now, currently, this information is only happening on this first column, but let's go ahead and select all of those. And I'm going to just I'm going to grab this little box in the corner and drag it down. And it's going to create instances of the equation and offset it by the number. So you can see that all of them have updated to the one next to it. And it's just the equation again and again and again, and everything's been split out. And all we have to do is drag and not copy and paste it a bunch of times. So very useful. So we need to bring this into Cinema in some way that it can read. And it's actually really straightforward. All we have to do is say File, download, and we have all these different formats, but there's one format here which is called a CSV, and you've probably seen CSVs before, but I didn't realize that a CSV just stands for comma separated values. So let's go ahead and download this as a CSV file. So I'm going to say go ahead and show this in the folder. It's in my download folder, and who knows what I've gotten there. So I'm going to open this up separately. I'm actually going to right click this. I just downloaded that file. I'm going to right click this. I'm going to say open with Notepad, and look at this. This is all the file is. It is now a bunch of information, and every one of the columns is separated out by a comma, 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 comma. So there we go. It's all separated out that way. Now what's cool is that Cinema can read this information. I'm going to copy that file, the raw file, and now we're going to travel into this episode's scene files, and let's jump in here, and I'm going to jump into this ASCII folder. I think that's how you pronounce that. And let's paste that CSV information. So now we've got that bit of information. Let's jump into Cinema. Wow, how do we get this thing in? Well, I'm going to create a null. And this null, let's just call this CSV. We don't have to, but there's our CSV. I'll probably do this wrong a couple times, and we'll eventually figure out how to do it correctly. But there's a function in Cinema, and to tell you the truth, I have no idea where the button is. But if we just hit Shift-C and we search for ASCII, but you can actually just type in II, because there's very few things that actually use ASCII information. I forget what that stands for. But, oh, ASCII. Thank you. It's ASCII. I knew I was saying it wrong. Let me make sure I've got this selected. And Shift-C ASCII. Let's search for that again. What do I have to do to make this not be grayed out? Because right now it's grayed out, so it doesn't like something about it. I might have to create a single keyframe on something. Let's try it again. No. Okay, I didn't expect to get stuck at that point. Let's try making a cube. And maybe, oh, maybe it needs to be in the timeline. I'm not sure. I don't know. Let's go to our dope sheet, our timeline dope sheet. And now we've got this in here. I mean, it does exist in there and it's open. That seems fine. So now let's type in Shift-S, II. Oop, okay, well, maybe we had to have it selected inside the timeline. Maybe this import in animation is somewhere inside the timeline. So we need to do it inside the timeline. I don't know for sure. Like this is mostly brand new to me. So let's go ahead and what did I just do to lose it? Yeah, I'm just gonna record a keyframe, and now you can see it's on here. And now I'm gonna type in Shift-C, II, and now you can see we've got the import, the ASCII animation import. So double click that, and now we can go and track down the file that we created, and that's inside of our scene file here. It's inside here, and now there's a CSV it will accept a CSV file. I'm gonna say open, and we're gonna get this little import animation setting. So you can see it's saying, is there a headline? Yes, we did have that one title headline. What are they separated by? They're separated by commas. What are we importing the information as? We can do real values, integers, which are whole numbers, bools, strings. And then it's saying, how should time be imported? And it can do project length. Frame was working weird for me. You can do project length, which just separates them all out, and it does work. But we know that the first column that we made is the frame. So I'm going to click first value is frame. I don't know if this will work. We might have to do a couple checks, but let's click it. It didn't work. Let me, I got to do the proper sequence because we're making this, or I'm mostly figuring this out live. I did find that it was getting upset about, I don't know. I'm just going to click the same thing again. I'm going to just, I'm literally going to do the same thing. And first value is frame. It didn't, it's not liking that. We might have to go back and export the CSV again, but let's go ahead and double click. And the one that's giving us trouble right now, I just know for a fact, is going to be this time, or this time value. So if we don't turn on the time value, we just go say separate by commas, and let's say okay. Then it's going to say import was successful. And now we have a track. Now, this is actually not looking as good as it did yesterday. So let's figure out what's going on. Yeah, I'm not sure. It's an empty track. Let's keep trying. We gotta figure it out, because I do think this is really, really useful information if we can get this working. Open, separate by commas. Actually, I do have one idea, but yeah, project length, import them as real values. We could say as strings, but that's dangerous. Maybe I did import them as strings, but just keep saying track. That's weird. Maybe there's even some information here that's not good. That was some information that could be breaking it, like 2 commas in a row and it gets confused or something. I'm going to delete this empty bar. These are all things I'm not familiar with. I'm going to delete that empty one. We've got all these titles going across. That actually by itself, you know, that's a fine theory. That could be what's causing us trouble. And they're obviously not all real values. So potentially it's getting confused by that. I don't know. But let's try it again. I'm fine spending a little time on this. So we will download that a second time. I'm going to go ahead and show it in the folder. Copy. Let's cut that and move it into the proper location, which is back in our scene file. Delete the old. Paste the new. There it is again. So this is the new version. I'm going to rename it just to be sheet 1 is fine. Not super informative, but it's different. And let's try this again. Shift C, ASCII import, sheet, open. I'm just going to do the comma and not change anything else. Import was successful. Hey, look at that. I think we had that one empty track, and that empty track was confusing it. So a lot more stuff has now come in, but I gotta say, they're all empty. So these are, I didn't label them. So apparently labeling would be a good idea. So we've got some of these tracks with no names, but you can now see that we have these different values that have come in. And these, I think, are our 3 color values. Now, some of these other ones will be confused, potentially. I don't know what that last one is, actually. Let's look back at our raw one. Maybe there's something empty here, but these are all 250, 250, 250 all the way. So I'd expect that to be a straight line. Yeah, so this one's a straight line. So this track is somehow reading these hex codes as something weirder, and labeling these would be good. So let's do it. I'm gonna say RGB just to be super clear for ourselves. And let's just call that tests, and everything else has a name. And let's see, let's just do that. Download CSV, download it again, show in folder, cut, episode 18, scene files, delete, paste. Okay, cool. I'll rename again. It'll be sheet 2. Boom. Okay. I think we can get it working this time. Now we've got all these tracks. We don't need all those. Delete them. Although if we delete all of them, then we lose our object. So drag it back in. Shift C, II, ASCII import, find the file, open. Now I'm going to do it just by clicking comma right now. And if it works, which it did, and look, RGB, perfect, exactly what we want to see. I'm going to undo, and let's do the import again. And this time, let's see if now that we deleted that column, can we get the frame numbers to come in? So I'm going to say comma, and I want the first value is frame, open. Import was successful. They did import, and now look at that. Now you see, if we look at the information we had, it's saying frame 0, frame 25, frame 50, and it's going all the way down the line. And you can see that the information came in at 0, 25, 50. So now that became the time. So we can zoom this way out, and you can see we've got all this nifty animation that we can work from. Our timeline is not long enough. Actually, how long does this go? This goes all the way up to frame 575. So we'll do that. 575. That is our overall animation. So we now have all of this nifty data in the form of tracks inside of our this just information null. So what do we do from here? Well, we want to do something useful with it. I'm going to create a cube, and let's see if we can generate the colors of this from that information that we just generated. So let's right click and do a little bit of Xpresso. Programming tags, Xpresso. Give that a second to pop open. There it is. So we need a couple of things. First of all, we need the cube. I want to control the color of the cube, and we just want to see in the viewport just to keep it simple. You could drive it anywhere on a material in a bunch of different places, but I'm just going to drive the direct color. So we can drag in the cube. I'm going to drag in the color, and that's going to be the color that we want to control directly. Oh yeah, we could set the frame to 25 frames per second. I'm not worried about that. And now, so there's the color. Now we need the information. Let's drag in CSV. Actually, I'm not even sure we need to drag in CSV, because what we actually want to do is search for the word track. So here's a track. It is a track coming in, and it wants to be fed a track. Now this tripped me up. You see there's a track right there? It's like, okay, there's a track right there. It wants a track. So I went into my timeline. I grabbed the track, and let's grab R, and I dragged it over. Oh, of course, now it's going to work. Well, last time it didn't work for me, but I'll tell you what did work for me. I'm going to drag a copy. We need the R and the G and the B. What did work is, if it didn't work for you, you can grab the track and just drag it directly onto the node, and then that did work. The first time I didn't work. Boom. So now we have RGB. Now, this isn't going to do anything. It's not going to animate at all, because we need time. You'll see that these have one. It's not showing it very well, but there's a input right here. Maybe because I dragged those on. You see that it wants time to be fed in. It doesn't know what time it is. So we just have to search for time. Now we got time. We can drag that over, and then this is already time. So I can just say, okay, that's the time. That's the time. That's the time. So now this should be accurately outputting those three numbers. Now, what we need to do is convert this to a vector. I actually don't need the CSV because the tracks come in directly. We need to combine these. So we can just search for the word vector, and we have there, right there, reals to a vector. So this is going to convert real numbers into a vector. So we can combine our R and our G and our B into a single number. Now let's see what that number actually is. Now, the way I like displaying the stuff, there's a couple of ways you can do it, but I like just making a text object. So we got a text object, drag that in, and I'm going to output this value to text. So now you can see, look at that. Inside of Cinema, we've recombined these into a vector that we can do things with. But we got one more little caveat. Now, we could have done this inside of the spreadsheet, but we can also, the work can also be done in Xpresso. I mean, we could probably write the code in, write code to be able to do this all in Xpresso, but, we're trying to do a little hybrid of getting the information in properly. The color, Cinema wants colors from 0 to 1, and these values are doing the 256, and I couldn't find any node that would do the conversion. It's entirely possible there is one, but we need to manually do this conversion. So just do a little bit of math here. You cannot divide a vector, but you can multiply a vector. So here's my thought. Let's go ahead and search for math. I'm going to drag in a math node. So what do we want to do? Well, we want to multiply our vector by some number. And let's make sure that this math node is a vector. So this is doing vector math now. I want to multiply this by some number. Well, what number do we want to multiply it by to make this go from 0 to 250 instead of, actually, I wonder if we could use a range mapper. We can use a range mapper. That's even better. If this works, this is just, it's more elegant, and it's more intuitive. If we drag this into the range mapper as a vector, and we make sure that this is acknowledging things as a vector, you can see we're expecting these different numbers. So what I can do is say, we are expecting the numbers to be anywhere from 0 up to 255, 255, 255. So these numbers could be anywhere from 0 to 255. And 255 is just like one of those mathematical numbers assigned to colors. So that's just a fact. Now, what should this output as? Well, it should output, if it's up to 255, it should output as 1, 1, 1. So all we have to do is say, convert your first number on that range to be a new range. Hopefully, if you're not familiar with range mappers, that might be confusing. But now you can see that we are converting. Well, hopefully those numbers will convert. So let's go ahead and just feed this out to be the color. Let's see. Look, it's a color. Yep. Okay, so we got a color now by combining these and using a range mapper to convert one to the other. So now, I don't know if this will work, but let's hit play. And it's not changing. Oh, wait, no, it's just really slow. Look, it's slowly fading to purple. And now it's slowly fading to pink. So now, based on the time, we can see our vector is updating, and that vector is converted to color. And now we are getting those colors over time based on the frame, which is amazing. It's just really fun. And I had no idea we could import ASCII information, and that ASCII could just be imported as like comma separated values. For somebody, I forget who it was, but somebody in the chat just said, where did this information come from? I actually got a question from somebody where they had a spreadsheet of information they wanted to get in Cinema. I was like, I don't know how to do that. I'd like to see if there's a way. So we just made this from a spreadsheet from scratch. So that is converting the time. All these are keyframes. That information came in raw, and we're able to just do some nice, clean, simple conversions here. Now, there's a million little steps. Let me pop this up. And there are a million little steps that we could tweak and change and move things around. We could have done a lot more of the math inside of the spreadsheet. Potentially, we could have done all of the stuff we did in the spreadsheet. We could have done it in Cinema. The frame information on the first column is very useful, but all of the other parts are converting the RGB. There might be different ways, but you see that I didn't know how to do that. I just Googled like, okay, I have a hex value. How do I change that into an RGB? And it's like, well, you can't do. Well, I just Googled hex to RGB, and somebody had a way of doing it. And we just had to translate it into something that we knew Cinema could handle. And just to throw it out there, inside of that equation, we could have just said divided by 255, and then it would have given us the actual value Cinema would have liked. I don't know if there's a way we could make it view it as a vector. I don't think we could. Like, you can't type out a vector and then have Cinema do it. So 3 separate numbers are probably the way you need to do it. But I don't know. I don't often work with spreadsheets, but yeah, if you have a spreadsheet and raw information, you could bring in the Cinema and just have it drive animations. So it might be worth making a little mini tutorial out of, like a standalone tutorial of like, oh, here's how you do it. But yeah, you don't need a lot of knowledge of spreadsheets in Excel or Google Sheets, and they're the same thing. You just need to be able to Google and translate everything that way. Yeah, so that should wrap up that question. Feel free to post new questions in. Let me take a look at the chat and see what everybody's saying. I was very focused because I was kind of like some weird new information I was only just learning, and even some of it we were just figuring it out. I know Smeka is hanging out. What's going on? Or as you might say, what's good? Let's see. Memories of Flash. Delete the first row. Oh yeah, that's going back a ways. Yeah, what was the question? Yeah, you'd be very confused if you came in and saw me just in spreadsheets. Let's see. Why the color's so blue? Yep. Oh, well, yeah, this is just like some sort of raw medical scan information, so that could be anything. Let's see. I'm not familiar with Spark AR, but that could be a thing. There's some questions coming in. I'm just checking anything in regards to what I just did, if there's any follow-up. Lots of people confused, like, wait, what did I miss? Yeah, so you don't want that empty column. That is definitely something we learned. Amit, thank you very much. It's appreciated. Range mapper, no? Yeah, oh, yeah, it looks like Flavio was one step ahead of me, going to a range mapper before doing the math. Thank you so much. Mike, it's entirely possible that somewhere in Cinema it can handle hex values. I searched the nodes. I don't have a screen up, but I had searched here where I was like searching for hex, and there is 2 hex. It can, there's some written Python that converts something to hex. It doesn't convert it back though. And then I was searching for different color things, and you got like color space calculations, and this almost seems like exactly what you want. We get RGB to SHV, and there's even things about like converting it from 0 to 250 type of thing, but there's no hex information here at all. I don't think any of these are hex. And like I said, it's just there's probably a lot of different directions to tackle this. Entirely possible there's a slightly different workflow somewhere, but the one we just did work, and there's probably a lot more. And the important part there is you don't know if you're getting information raw. I mean, you know, in the jobs that we're in, if you're doing motion graphics, it's probably highly likely you're going to get a spreadsheet from a client, and the information is going to be all over the place, where it's like, okay, there's a bunch of columns that are useless. There's a bunch of columns that aren't doing what you want. You need to convert that math, and you want to have it, you know, if you go and you modify the sheets in such a way that every time they send you an updated one, you can just kind of copy their info to your modified version and then re-import that as a CSV, a comma separated value format. Then you take control over it. And the idea here isn't that there's a specific way of doing it. It's that here's the raw information, and we now have a way of translating it into cinema. And that's pretty powerful and pretty cool. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, maybe I thought that I think in my reference it was supposed to be pretty blue, but maybe some of the digits weren't quite correct in the ones I imported, but, or divide the blue by alpha. I'm not sure. Yeah, two different people are saying there's something involving that I might use the wrong hex code. Like I said, I don't know how to use the hex code, so I just Googled what somebody else said and I used what they had. But we might have been integrating the alpha, so maybe the colors were slightly off. But you just make sure that your spreadsheet is doing the proper math. So if these were all maxed out, maybe this information just needs to be tweaked to view the numbers differently. So I'm not worried about the specifics. It's got the overall effect. Let's see. Although, I mean, that's good information to know if I were ever try and make a real tutorial out of it. Let's see. Let's jump into another question. I appreciate it, everybody. We're going to jump into YouTube to find one this time, alternating back and forth. Let's see. Oh man, Javed is asking, is there a way of disconnecting hairs from an object to make dynamic hair falling? That is an excellent question. I spent a lot of time way back in the day for a SIGGRAPH presentation to try and figure out exactly how to do that. And I got to tell you, I don't think I found a way to do it. I didn't find a way of disconnecting the hairs so that they were free to float around. And there's all those different settings that say, like reconnect hairs, do this thing. Your hairs can get delinked. I don't think I ever found a way of actually enabling the hairs to completely disconnect. Having said that, I did find a really nifty workaround. First of all, I wonder if I can find the animation that I did there. This can be hard to find. Give me a second. I gotta look at my presentation folder. Where would that live? It probably live on my F drive. Nope. It might live inside of Enter presentations. That might go back. Yeah, I have on this computer, I've got everything back to 2018, but I think that's older than 2018. Yeah, that's not old enough. I'd really like to find the animation I made with it. I made a really, I'd really like to, we actually had some drop frames. That's interesting. I did an entire animation when we made Signal, and I made this dancing tree, and the tree was dancing like techno music. And at the end, all of the seeds fly off. I got to be able to find that somewhere. It's really cool. Actually, yeah. Smecca, that's a good point. I could just find the presentation. Yeah, we can find that. It's going to be on Cineversity. So let's find that. So let's go back to our creepy eye reference and go search for Chris Schmidt. SIGGRAPH, 2016. Rewind. This one might be it. No, this is the tentacle one, which was fun. And it also might be NAB. So let's try the previous year. Yeah, no, this is a different one. That's hair. Man, I made some cool stuff though. It's got to be, it can't be this far back. So let's go forward. Let's try 2017. This seems too recent though. Exploring parts of cinema you've been avoiding. Oh, it is this one. Okay, it was a little more recent than I thought. Okay, the audio's off. So let's jump, see if we get to a point where the I usually keep intros relatively short. SGSG, doing all the pitches. Yeah, we got to find this modeling. We got to show the final animation somewhere. When we make this crazy tree, I just want to find the animation. Doo-ba-doo-ba-doo. Vimeo's so hard to navigate around. Yeah, yeah, I'm not going to be able to find it by scrubbing around like this. Well, it's got this crazy tree thing. Well, they do have time codes, but I don't think... Sample reel? What does that mean? Oh, did I find it? Let's see. I'm going to turn on the audio here. Jump back a little bit here. Now you can see me. This is where I was saying I get impatient and fast forward. So after a little while, the moon rises. When the moon rises, then there's like these little plants that grow off the tips of them, little flowers. So that is the effect that we are trying to replicate. It was really fun making this animation. I spent way too long on it, but there's a lot of neat aspects to it that I really enjoyed. So that was when I had just finished developing the beats per minute feature in Signal that we were working with deadmau5 to create. It was kind of his idea, and then we took the idea and kind of went and made this entire system that worked with BPM. It was really neat. So I wanted to kind of push the limitations and see what I could do with it. So here we are with a figure. I put into a connect, made it editable. So we got a figure. Now I'll create some hair. We'll say simulate, add hair, too long. Oh, we're already in forces. I'm going to set my forces down to 0. Under guides, let's make these not as long. Under hairs, I'm going to say I want exactly as many hairs as we have guides. I think that's actually important in this circumstance because otherwise they're going to float really weird. So, okay. Hairs, I want them to root as guides. So now they just perfectly match hairs. I want to be able to see how they look in the viewport. So under editor, I'm going to say I want to see not the guidelines. I want to see the hair polygons. I want to see all of them. I want the enhanced viewport shading. So now we can actually see the final hairs pretty well. And I think the shading would even come through relatively well if we had that all turned on. We turn on SSAO and the shadows should, well, I thought they'd come through, but I could have some settings weird. But that's fine. We turned off gravity. I also turned off global gravity, which is important. And now we can create a simulate forces turbulence. I'm going to make it a little bit stronger, and let's give it a pretty good scale so we can see a little bit of uniformity between them. So maybe that's a little too much uniformity. So there, now you can see how they're wafting around, doing their thing, working pretty much exactly as I want. Now, if you know me, you know I like doing 2 levels of turbulence. So this can be turbulence large. I'm going to copy and paste it, and now we can do a turbulence small. And the idea here is we have one turbulence and it's kind of big and very uniform. I'm going to turn that one off and let's turn the other one on. And this one, I'm going to make it be a very small scale. And the small scale one, you can see that they're going to be very individual. So we've got one that's like, okay, all of you behave kind of similarly. And then another one saying, okay, behave, you know, a little bit more random. And those two, we turn both on and they'll fight each other a little bit. But the idea is we should get some variation while still getting that layer of uniformity between them as well. And I think in this kind of wafting situation, we'll need that type of thing. So here's where things get novel. I want these hairs to fly off, but as far as I could do, and I did a lot of tests, I could never get them to fall off and continue behaving dynamically. So here is the crazy thought. I'm gonna make a duplicate of the body. Now this one is the one we will see. So this will be the visible one. Visible has 2 eyes. That's our visible one. And now we've got our hair one. And this hair one is where we're actually generating the hairs on. So instead of letting the hairs waft around using the hair dynamics, why don't we use our other dynamics? Let's use simulation soft body. We're going to use a soft body hair. And if we are using soft bodies, this should be able to just kind of waft around in the air a little bit. But if I play, you're going to see it's going to be a little bit weird. Oh dear. It's choking immediately. I'm not sure why. So let's see. I'm going to see if I can stop it. Okay, well, I was able to stop it, but I don't know why it just choked so hard on that. So let's save this. It's a little dangerous. Scene files. Bump, 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 bump. Floating hairs. Okay, we got floating hairs. How do we make this work properly? I'm going to temporarily turn off the hair, and let's just, I'm going to go frame forward. Oh, I know why it's freaking out, because we're using soft bodies, and we didn't do the magic sauce on this. So what I'm going to do is on the connected hair, like the model, I'm going to say, do not use self-collisions. So now every point, they don't care about the other points around them. They can just pass right through the polygons. It doesn't matter. But they are still connected via all these soft body springs. So if I'm going to, it's always dangerous when you're doing something new in dynamics that just hit play. I shouldn't have done that. What you should do is just go frame forward. And then as soon as you see it move a little bit, it's like, okay, it's moving. It's not taking 5 minutes to calculate one frame. So now you can see if I hit play that now you can see this is drifting away. So, okay, that is drifting away. You see these individual parts seem to be floating away from each other a little bit. So that seems all good. It's calculating a little bit slow, but that's okay. But here's where it gets interesting. Under soft body, let's get rid of all these springs. I'm going to say, don't worry about structurally being maintained. Don't worry about the shear. No damping, no flexion, no damping. Like, get rid of all of those. So now essentially all the springs between all those different parts are broken, which means all of these soft bodies, all the individual points, are going to be affected by the forces in the scene, and they don't care about their neighbors at all. So I'm going to, once again, frame forward once, frame forward twice. Okay, it seems okay. I hit play, and look at that. Look at how the entire model is just super crazy exploding. Now, that's going to look ridiculous, but, and before we go to the hairs, just to show you, think of this more like a kind of a particle system, because they don't have any relationship to each other. I'm going to make a matrix. I'm going to tell it to clone onto this, the figure, and I'm going to say clone onto every single vertex. So click on, or go onto the vertex. So if I hit play, you're going to see that these are going to, because now we're not, actually, let me visually hide the mesh. So now we're not seeing the mesh at all. So now if you just look at where the points are going, this is kind of behaving like a particle system. All of these are just going wherever the forces tell them to go. And all those points are like passing right through each other, but it's just, they're just going wherever they want to go. And I think they're still dynamic. So they would still do things. I think they'd still do things like bounce off the floor. So let me make a floor here. Copy the dynamics tag on there. I'm just curious if that'll work, actually. Hit play. And yeah, look, they won't even pass through the floor. I mean, 50% they will, but they won't actually go through it. So we can still block these. We can still, actually, I didn't, even in the hair thing, I didn't actually use this as an attribute. But if I were to create like a big sphere here, and we also make that a collider body, I think that will have, nope, that will not. I'm going to say turn off, and now it's off. So now there should be another collider body. These cannot pass through that shape. So we can actually trap these, and actually it would be cooler is if we reset the PSR, scale that up a little bit. Actually, too big. I'm going to do this, and we'll trap them inside of the sphere. I'm going to make the sphere invisible, and then make the, this is a collider body. We just have to make sure that the shape is not automatic, but a static mesh. And now, with any luck, these can float around, but they're going to bounce off the sphere. Yeah, so look, they're trapped inside of that sphere, and it's just a cool kind of weird particle system that we just made. So hopefully you get the concept there, where it's just soft bodies, but individual points doing whatever the heck they want. They don't care. So with that working, we don't need to see the matrix anymore. Let's check out the hair. The hair is currently growing onto each of those different objects. Now, what is it currently growing on? Currently it's going, polygon vertex. So it's currently growing directly onto the individual points. So let's see. We have the forces are applying to these hairs, but they're also applying independently to what they're cloned onto. Now, it's still a little bit dangerous, so I'm going to frame forward one, frame forward again, frame forward again. I'm just trying to see a little bit of movement. It's not refreshing very well, but it's not taking too long either. I'm a little worried about just hitting play. It's not refreshing the way that I want it to, but I'm going to try. Oh, okay. Interesting. Give me a second just to make sure. I'm gonna turn off the hairs for a moment, and let's make sure that it's okay. That's still drifting and exploding. Now let's turn the hairs on and hit play. And that's drifting. Okay, that's drifting and floating, but the individual hairs are not moving with it. I mean, this presentation was a couple of years ago. I need to double check what we got. So currently the mapping is set to old. Maybe it's mapping. I don't know. The growth is based on the normals. That's probably fine. Editing, regrow, store, all that seems fine. Let's say I'm going to put this on new, possibly unroot. I'm not sure. We'll see if that does anything. No, that's not it. Let me make sure that this is, yeah, this is on connect hair. So that's on the correct object. So give me a moment. We just got to figure out what these are connected to. The hairs are as guides. The growth, that's all fine. Cloning, square. I wonder if I had even pushed this a step further. It's possible. And like I said, I don't have those files handy, but I got it working. So we just got to find the correct setting here. Oh, well, let's try that. Somebody's saying maybe move the hair below there so it calculates in a different order. We can try that. If it's, no, that sadly didn't work. Actually, we gotta be, let's think about this, because look, the hairs actually aren't updating at all. You look well, maybe it's because it's moving, but you see the hairs aren't being affected by the turbulence anymore. Oh, actually, it just refreshed. I wonder if there's a refresh issue, because you can see, I just clicked it and I saw them suddenly refresh. What is triggering a refresh? Because maybe it doesn't work in the viewport. That'd be something. It'd be unfortunate, but let's find out. Don't save all frames. Send to the picture viewer. Yep. Okay. It doesn't work in the viewport. All right. Well, that's not the biggest deal. It's just one of those. Okay. It just doesn't refresh in the viewport. It's, potentially we can report that to Maxon. So, if they're all just supposed to fly off the figure, we just hide the one that's super dynamic. And in fact, this one probably could become a collider body. That could be a little dangerous. I'm not going to do it, but you could potentially make that collider body so they don't pass through it. And now we got all these individual hairs. And then we could even say that this is not dynamic right away. So let's say dynamic off, and I can hit play, and that should work. And then right on, let's say frame 15, I'm going to animate it from not being dynamic to the next frame becoming dynamic on. I don't know if that'll work or not, but let's give that a go. And light, shadow. I mean, it's not a very colorful scene, but let's send that to the picture viewer. I hid the original object. So let's see, these are wafting around, doing their thing, looking really weird. And then, yep, in frame 15, they didn't reset. They just suddenly are drifting off and doing whatever they want to. And there they go, just like instant alopecia. Like, it's like a naked Bigfoot. And those will do their thing. And if these were connected to, we could trap them inside of a dynamic shape. And those would do their thing, and we could probably make them not collide with the object. And there you go. We've now done a workaround to have these hairs be able to suddenly at least give the illusion of disconnecting and flying away, doing whatever they want to. Yeah, neat. Yep, I spent a lot of time figuring out how to do that. Although that might have led me down the path of soft bodies with no springs, which has definitely led me down additional experiments that were really useful. So yeah, a lot of fun stuff there. Let me check the chat. Salam, this was not our, I made the original one in like R19, so this is not requiring new versions. It just doesn't refresh properly. People posting new questions. Dancing Tree, yeah, I caught up. Yeah, okay, everybody seems to like that, and they're just posting new questions, which is fine with me. We're back on Twitch now because that question came from YouTube. Checking Twitch. Let me see if there's anybody who's not, who I don't, I like grabbing questions from people that I haven't grabbed questions from before. Perez. Yeah, Perez, what do you got here? You're saying it's a thinking particle or an X particles thing. I'll click it. I'm always worried about doing X particle videos because I'm just not an expert in them. So I end up spending a lot of time just floundering around. FIFA Women's World Cup, possibly made by Kim Teddy. But I always gotta be careful because usually when there's big projects like that, there's like an entire team. But yeah, okay, the design and art team was Kim Teddy, and then there's the designer Hugo Johnson, more 3D by Jaden and Ben. So yeah, just making sure I want to give the entire team credit. Let's turn off the audio. Check out what we got. Now, you were saying the X particle trails moving with the character. Well, trails following the character. So, whoa, yeah. Would I call those trails like X particle trails? You'd have to generate them possibly with X particles, but then I think you'd want to drive them. I think you'd want to drive them on the character. So this, I mean, first of all, it's really cool. It's beautiful. I love these like kind of neon shots, and these close-ups are amazing. But I don't think X particles would definitely be super useful for generating the initial part, but I'm trying in here to avoid using plugins whenever we can. So let me give you a for instance of another way of doing it. I know we've been getting a lot of mileage out of our figure, but you know, that's fine. It's a helpful little figure guy. Let's just use that again. I'm gonna check the polygon count and let's give it a couple more subdivisions. And what we could do if you were doing it kind of what I think would be the proper way, you would maybe use some particles and emit a bunch of particles and have them travel the surface. I don't even think it's that difficult to do. But it's going to be, you can't make those lines then travel with a character very well. So what I'm thinking is, keep triggering all of my smart devices and they keep hearing me. So what I'm thinking here is, let's just make this, I'm not going to have a rigged character. What would be the best bet there? We did, I guess we got the ragdoll version. Would that work? Not really. We need the joint-based version. Well, yeah, let's just tinker. I'm going to create a connect, once again, turn into a single model. And we could go and do some sort of tracing of lines all over the place and getting the outlines. I'm going to skip that part, assuming that you can generate those. What I'm going to do is just I'm just going to grab some outlines, some random loops of the character all over the place. we're not going to like go nuts on these, but let's just grab a few around. So just a little something like that, perhaps. I'm going to hit Shift-C, type in edge 2, and there's edge to spline. We'll convert those all to splines, and I'll just do a quick second pass where I grab a couple extra lines on the other axis. I just wanted, those need to be separate objects. So I'll grab there, there. Some of these might cross over. I almost guarantee they will. Some of these might be a little bit funky, but let's do another Shift-C, edge 2, enter, and now we should have 2 sets of splines. And now the thought is, we've got these splines that should be kind of visually representing the character. There's a lot of different ways of generating those lines. And you could just have your static character and then have all those particles float through. Wouldn't be the craziest thing. I could even think of some additional ways we might be able to do it, but I'm not worried about that part, and I'd like to hit lots of questions. So let's just say we've already got all these lines and they're kind of traveling out throughout the entire character. With that being the case, we can, I guess we're going to need, well, yeah, we're not doing character animation because I'm always driven crazy when people use bend deformers to do character animation. But if I'm just going to use a bend deformer here because I don't want to spend a bunch of time rigging up the character. So if we drop a bend deformer inside of the character, fit it to parent, and now we can just wiggle it around. I set keep Y length, and now we can wiggle this. So if that is the case, we just want these to go wherever that model is going. So if this was a full running character, we just need these lines to deform with the character. And with any luck, that should be as simple as, I'm going to create a null. And let's just say it's a fully modeled character. So I know right now we could put it with a bend. I don't want to do it that way. So this is what you'd have to do as a fully animated character is we'd create a mesh deformer. Mesh deformer, put it inside here, and I want these splines to go anywhere that this connect goes. We'll drag that in, go to advanced, make sure it's doing surface, external surface, so it catches any points that might sneak outside of it. Click initialize, and hopefully that's really all we need to do. And if we grab our bend and we start bending it, oh, well, it's not quite doing it. Does it not like doing splines? Maybe it doesn't like splines. Yeah, I know we could grab Mixamo and do all that stuff, but I can't share Mixamo files. And when I say share, all these scene files will be available on Patreon. Why is that? I don't think it needs to be like a child, but maybe it does. I'm gonna try reinitializing, and let's just see if that one of those sets work. Huh, I thought the mesh deformer would just work there. Let me think, because that should work if it was geometry. For instance, if I were to make a second character and bind that to the connect, initialize. So now we are not seeing the first character, we're only seeing the second. If I say deform, you see it is deforming. We're seeing the second one deform. So it doesn't want to deform the splines, which is a little frustrating. Is that just a thing? It doesn't deform splines? I mean, it's a mesh deformer, but come on. Well, that sucks. Initialize, do something. Wow, okay. Today I learned mesh deformer doesn't work with splines. No, sadly, Dean, this is not a when in doubt, use a connect object, because we applied it directly as a child, and it's like if it's not being acknowledged directly as a child, then it's not going to work at all. So yeah, it doesn't work with a. It's not working with a spline. Let me think. I'm trying to think if there's a workaround here. I'm actually kind of stumped. Now, yeah, there's a bunch of people shouting out like different plugins and all the stuff. Like I said, I'm trying to do it in vanilla. So, like, yeah, we could use Mixamo, we could use Turbulence, we could, there's a bunch of different things. I don't know what you mean, Xlist. Cloning a spline on geometry. I don't understand. And that every method that pops in my head is way too clunky. Because we could have a series of points on here, like polygon points, and then we could use a tracer and interconnect them. But that's going too crazy. You don't want to do that for like the project reference we just saw. I mean, potentially you could do like a surface deformer where we could tell these to possibly deform onto the mesh of the secondary object. Initialize, but yeah, even that's not seemingly working. Huh. There's two different people saying to clone the spline onto geometry. That's a nonsensical statement to me. I don't understand what you mean. Like, you can't clone. We can clone splines, but they would be cloned onto the geometry. We could clone a series of like straight angles onto edges, but that's not what we want to do. Not even close. Yeah, those would be separate splines. We wouldn't want to do that. And you get maybe you're not thinking about the original animation, but these are like long arcing lines that can travel through the entire character. So constrain the splines, that would take too long. It would take you could do that. I have like 3 or 4 methods in my head, but it'd be so manual. I wonder if it just goes to like, do you just need the particle system to do it? Yeah, EMV. I'm sorry. I don't think you're barking up the right tree on that idea. Javid has got a suggestion, which would make for a neat visual, but it wouldn't work here. Where he's saying to clone like dynamic spheres inside of it and then trace the dynamic spheres. But that means when the character walks, it's going to be falling behind. Where really what's happening is these are like, it's almost like we're seeing the veins in the character and it moves with the character. Huh. I thought this would be like trivially easy, and it turns out it's actually seemingly kind of complicated. Tobias, they were. I've tried putting the mesh deformer directly as a child of the spline, and it didn't work. Yeah, you could deform the sweep. Jam, I don't think it'd be a material-based thing. Zalam is correct for an alternative. It's not what I'd want to do, but potentially, I'm going to turn off one of them. Like if we were to take that and sweep it. So I'll just hold down Alt, create a sweep. How did I do that twice? Sweep, do 2, T for scale. So you get that. Now we have actual geometry. And if we had those traveling around the overall shape via various means, that should become geometry that should be able to be deformed. So our mesh, let's turn that off and then initialize and then deform. And yeah, now you can see that those lines did move with it. But if that geometry, let me make that a little more visible. If that geometry is changing over time, I'm not sure if it would work. What's a simple way of showing it? If we make the end growth a lot less. Oh yeah, yeah, you can even see, do you see as soon as I change my geometry at all, if I change the end growth, it suddenly pops out of existence. So that won't acknowledge it inside of it. So you can't have changing geometry inside of a mesh deformer. It won't acknowledge it. So it has to be static. So that would be, these would be static lines. And then you'd have to just animate them via a material, which seems really clunky. I mean, even most spline, it generates a spline, and the spline can maybe trace around another spline, but we can't clone it onto a surface, and most spline isn't going to suddenly be able to be deformed. Yeah. Yeah, I might have to. I mean, let's do I'm going to call that a dead end completely. Let's do the most basic possible version of this inside of Xparticles, just to see if we can get the basic version working, and if Xparticles can just handle it. I'm just going to make a capsule shape, and let's see, maybe not a capsule shape. I want something to deform. We'll make a cone. Cone's a little different than usual. Make it a little bit taller. And we need a couple subdivisions possible. Yeah, we want to deform it, so we'll put a couple extra subdivisions in there. And the particles might collide violently with the corner, but we will just once again play with the bend deformer. Keep Y length, and I shall keyframe it. Keyframe will end in the same place we started. 25 frames in, we'll bend one way. Keyframe, jump to another point, bend the opposite way. Keyframe. So now we just have bend. And let's see if we can get Xparticles to handle it. As soon as we're going to do Xparticles, I immediately want to save the file because you never know if I'm going to do something I shouldn't. Alrighty. Now, the cone itself is not terribly important. What we do need to do is have it traveling around the surface. I feel like there's actually an area of Xparticles I know decently well. I'm going to make an emitter, and I want to emit not from a rectangle, but let's emit from an object. Why not? The object will be the shape itself. Let's see what that does. Okay, particles flying everywhere. Cool. They're currently, yeah, the particle direction is the normal of the object. I'm going to invert it so they're trapped in, well, they're shooting inside of the object. That's the hope. I'm going to hide the tube. So that is also fine. They're shooting inside, but immediately escaping. That's fine. I think let's just make a initial burst of particles. So instead of it being a rate, I'm going to set it to a shot. It's a shot of particles for duration of 1 frame. So we should get, boom, 1 shot of particles, and those are just what exists. There's probably more than we need there. So let's drop it down to it, 333. So few, actually, there's still quite a few. 55, more than enough. All right, now let's make it a little more visible. I'm going to say display as circles so we can see it a little bit better on the stream. Particles. Now let's make our object itself a collider. So we go to X particle tags, XP collider, and that's now a collider body. The normal or the normals are on the outside. I'm going to say they're in the inside. So it wants to bounce on the inside. And actually, I'm going to temporarily turn off the bend just to make sure that these are, yeah, see, they're trapped now inside the cylinder shape. Let's give ourselves a couple extra frames. I want these to travel along the surface. I think there's several ways to do that. We could connect them on collision, but I like them being trapped, but there's probably some sort of XP modifier, which is going to be like some sort of surface modifier. Motion. Oh, follow surface. That seems good. And the object to follow, I guess, will be the cylinder. Hopefully don't have to make it editable. Okay, immediately seems to be on there pretty well. Those seem, yeah, those are traveling along the wall. They're also, in theory, trapped inside. They seem to be doing a fine job of kind of bouncing and doing their own thing. There's friction. Let's say it's accurate, and we don't have too many particles, so I don't think it's going to slow us down too much. So now let's turn on the bend and see if the bend keeps them. Yeah, they seem to be acknowledging the bend just fine. So let's create a little bit of turbulence inside there so they're more inclined to bounce around all over the place. Motion turbulence. And give it a little more strength. Let's turn off the bend. Yeah, these are kind of spreading them around a little bit more. Now, see, this is still going back to, I don't think... How... I suddenly just realized, like, yeah, we're doing this, and these are following the surface and all that. It's fine, but it's not going to solve our final problem, and that's going to be, let's go ahead and trace these. It's going to look cool, but it's not going to be the effect that we're going for. So I want XP trail, so we get these trails tracing around. It's like, okay, that looks great here. That's kind of the effect, and we could even say that they are limited by, 30 frames. So yeah, these should live for 30. Yeah, now they won't get too long. So it's like, okay, cool. That's exactly what we're looking for. Except when we turn on the bend and these are starting bending around, you're going to see that they're escaping the cylinder. If we look at the cylinder or the cone shape, this tracing doesn't move along with it. Now, what we could say is like, well, okay, that's fine. Let's put the XP trail inside the bend deformer as well, so that that trail will bend. You see, well, right away, those look weird that way. Actually, does that make sense? I kind of thought that would work correctly. I thought it wasn't gonna work, but not for this reason. I thought that would work. Huh. No, maybe that does make sense, because as the shape bends, the particles are being chased, and one of the particles is coming way over here. And then I guess what you'd need this to do is bake the trail. Yeah, you'd have to bake the trail, or this would have to reference the original cone. Yeah, trace between. How do you trace between? Shane, I don't know how to trace between the points very well. I know that there's some different modes inside of this tracer to do different connections, but we need like this really clear trail traveling down, and that I don't know how to do. And in order for it to do the step that, how much time would it take? Essentially, we need these to be trapped inside of a shape that doesn't deform. So we could do that. I guess we need the original, so I'll do that, do that, do that, and do that. Now, the particles are only caring about the original cylinder that's not deforming, and so they're still trapped in there. And then all the deformation happens after the fact. So now you can see that those trails are bending with it. But the problem with this, and we can hide, yeah, we can hide everything now. I guess not everything. You can see that, yes, this will deform. We don't care about the particles. All we care about is the final line. And essentially, that is doing visually what we want it to do. The problem is that we cannot deform. We can't deform these trails with a more complex setup, because we already saw that the mesh deformer didn't work on splines. I mean, you could try it on the XP trail. I doubt that there'd be a difference there. Because any character is going to be rigged with joints, and joints might work on a spline, but they're not going to work on a live spline. Yeah, MW, but and that could totally work. Well, actually, that wouldn't totally work, but well, in the end, we see. I know there's a lot of people trying to help out, but this is where it gets really technical. And it's honestly where I have to ignore a lot of what everybody's suggesting because there's a lot of potential dead ends that I'm like thinking about and being like, nope, 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 nope. So this isn't about X particles. It's about that we have this spline, and the spline won't be acknowledged by a mesh deformer. That is really where our trouble is right now. If this right now we're bending it directly with this bend. If we could pull this out, let this cone get deformed, and have a mesh deformer deform our XP trail, and we can try it again. I don't think it's going to work, but let's create a mesh deformer, and I want it to view the cone, initialize. Let's even turn that on, initialize that, and deform. And you see that just keeps staying where it is. And if it can't handle this with a simple bend deformer, it wouldn't be able to handle it with a joint. And I think a lot of the people throwing out suggestions are not thinking of the problem as complex as it is. Like if you just think about it for a second, it's going to seem like, oh yeah, you could just do this. It's like, oh wait, no, that wouldn't actually work. So for anybody throwing out some of those suggestions, try and build the rig, and if it works, like post it on the Slack channel, so that we can all learn from it. But I don't think those things will work. And yeah, it's all because we need the spline to kind of be this live thing, even if it wasn't live, even if it was baked, and we already did a baked version. Cinema is not allowing us to deform the spline, and you can't deform a live one, because everything binds to points. Connect object. Everybody in the connect object. Watch. I'm going to put in a connect object. It's not going to work. Connect. Don't weld. Go. Nope. Let's change it around. We'll move the outside of it. Initialize. Nope. I guess I am a little disappointed at the mesh deformer. I know it's called a mesh deformer, but I thought that would work with splines. I mean, it's all it's doing is manipulating points, so I don't see any reason why it shouldn't work on the rest of it. I don't like shrink wrap. Seems weird, even if it does work. That's not the way it should be done. Yeah, like I said, this isn't about the particles sticking to the surface. It's about the result of the particles. These trails need to stick to the surface. And there was somebody saying that we could, interconnect individual particles, and the particles could be trapped inside here. And I do agree, but we need a living series of trails around, and like almost like a series of particle snakes traveling around the surface. And I don't know how to do that with X particles for sure. For sure. I can't remember. It was like 3 years ago. Yeah, real pixel. Like we would need a mesh deformer if we're using a rig that's using a skin deformer. And a skin deformer just deforms things based on the points that it's referencing. And essentially an XP trail or a tracer object doesn't have points it can reference because it's not acknowledging splines. Well, we did two kind of different dead ends, which are too bad. We have the fakey version if we just do that, but that is not, or if we move this in with a bend, but that's not real. This isn't, this works with this cone. It wouldn't work with a character. Bralius, yes, you could use a Mo spline and reference the trails, but what's the Mo spline doing? The Mo spline also won't be affected by a mesh deformer. It's a spline. Yeah, I'm going to call this one a dead end. If anybody has a clean method, there's a lot of very manual ones. Like there's some suggestions of baking as alembic, doing a bunch of different things. But once you do that, we're out of this like parametric world. And that's not what I'm trying to do. if the mesh deformer worked here, that'd be parametric enough for me, which is like we could do like one static character and then another one that deforms just the circulatory thing that, you know, there's kind of like the circulatory system traveling through the mesh. Like that would be acceptable to me, but that is not what we get because it's the bend deformer affecting it directly. And then, yeah, we got things like shrink wrap in the surface, but surface deformer is, unless you're just deforming onto like a simple, very, very simple shape, it's tricky to use. Retro, I don't know if this is what you're saying, but that does give me one small idea. But it goes to, can you bind a spline to a joint chain? If that worked, if that does work, then we could do it. Then it would be something. Let me just fully read what you're saying. Project, the character was modeled within the spline geometry and then rigged after. I'm not sure what you mean. Maybe it wasn't a bend deformer. There you go. Maybe it wasn't entirely a bend deformer. Okay, so I got one last thought, kind of inspired by what Retro was just saying. But we just need, we got to do a quick test to see if it works at all. I'm going to let this straighten out. And then we got all these lines. I'm going to make it editable, copy it, undo, so we can go back to that if we need to. And go into new scene file, paste in just this final spline. Can we make a joint chain? And can that joint chain bind it? So pretty straightforward. I'm going to aim this joint up. Actually, there's easier ways to do this. I'm going to make a helix and lay the helix flat on the ground. Set it to 0, 0. Move this down to the bottom of the cylinder. T for scale, scale it up until it's the full length of the cylinder. Set this to how many joints you want it to be. I want it to be 10. And then make that editable. And then character, convert spline to joints. And there you go. Now I got instant joint chain. So we got that. Now, essentially, this should be as easy as selecting this joint chain and then going to character, bind. And if I rotate this and it bends with it, then we might have some luck. Okay, it is bending with it. So it's got its skin deformed, but you see it does still get this weight tag, and that's the important part. If I delete that weight tag, yeah, it doesn't work. So we need the weight tag. We don't need that. So this weight tag, I don't think it's going to actually show us. Yeah, it's not going to be able to colorize these splines, but I wonder if we can still smooth it out. I kind of think it's not going to work. Yeah, this is going to be clunky. It's going to be clunky, but let's see. If I double, actually, if I hold down shift as I double click, here's a little detail. If you click on this weight tag, it just gives you some very basic information about what joints are in there. If you double click it, it's actually going to go to the weight tool. And the weight tool is a bunch of really nice tools to be able to like paint on different weights for different joints. But the tool I actually want is the weight manager. So if you hold down shift and you double click the tag, it'll actually pop up, open the weight manager. So it's a crazy little chain of shortcuts in order to get the menu to do what you want it to do. But the reason I did that is I actually want to just pop this open, go to smoothing mode, and I'm going to hit apply a couple times. If we're in a normal mesh, this would make everything very smooth in the way it's bending, but I'm thinking that's not going to work on a spline. I've never tried it. Well, let's see. Oh, that's weird. Again, undo a few times because I hit the button. Usually when I smooth a lot of times, and I don't know how many times I have to undo. That should be enough. So let's do it once. Well, let's check it again. So just look at the way it's bending. You see it's very chunky. It's like very harsh bend. So let's now select all the joints in the tag. I'm going to say apply a smooth one time. I'll do it too. Now let's grab the middle one and see if it's still as chunky of a bend. As far as I can tell, yes, it is. I'll do it again. I think I might have been an absolute. I'm not sure. I'm going to hit apply on the smooth. And let's see. No, see, it's still as chunky. So you can't, I didn't think it would work, sadly. It's going to be a very harsh transition from one to the other. Now, we did make a nice smooth joint chain, so that's not to say it wouldn't sort of work. Let me think if there's any additional I mean, well, let me finish the thought. If I were to select all these and go to coordinate and rotate them each, let's do this axis. You see that's going to bend, but you look at how chunky it gets. Like, that's not nice. And it's just the way that they're getting bound to this. And based on that, is there any way of smoothing them? If we had fewer points, but we already generated by tracing them, so we can't really get fewer points. The skin has got like some different modes, but I don't think any of them are. Yeah, none of those are going to be really doing much. And here, this tag doesn't have anything, so that it's kind of limited to that. This doesn't seem to do anything. And then we could change the spline type to be something smoother, like a B spline. That's as smooth as it gets. But these are still the actual points that we're getting. So even if I set that to Bezier, ooh, does not. Oh, boy. Okay, yikes. Well, that's creating additional points to subdivide it. So we can't do that. We have to work on what we have here. But then from here, what I would do is we could hide that and now create the most spline. Now the most spline could actually do something. And the most spline could be set to spline mode, and it can reference the XP trail. And now you see we get a second copy of it. And we do have the option of like pulling back the end. And let's say it's based on the segments. And now you see I've got a bunch of little individual segments of these little spines. So I could pull these along. You see it's actually kind of traveling along. If I push beyond 100, or this is an offset. So if I push negative, then you can see them do these little twists and curls. But as long as we're in the range of 0 to 100, then you see they just travel along pretty nicely. And now, do we have the option of, actually, it doesn't look like we do. I thought that this would give us some smoothing options. I'm not really seeing any. Interesting. Those would travel along, and you see that these are like the post deformer. They're seeing it after the deformer. So this, that would get put into a sweep, and then we put it in the inside, and we can say, don't use the rail scale. Scale down the end side, and now you see we get these actual little bits of line. The sweep itself could, get, you can get skinny, so you can actually get these little pinchy, sneaky looking things going. But the point being is you can still see how chunky they look. As I grab these joints, and this is with a lot of joints, so this is as smooth as a deformation as we can get. But look how chunky these snakes get. The little snakes traveling along are like really compressing on top of each other based on the way the joints are applying to them. And now we're putting a sweep. We couldn't make it smoother via the most spline. Now we could take that entire sweep and put it into a subdivision surface, and it's going to smooth them out, but you can still see we're getting these zigzag effects. And this zigzag isn't sensical if it was on a cylinder. So yeah, that kind of is pushing the technique as far as I kind of think we can push it. You see we get these nice little snakes going around, but you can just see the chunkiness of them. You see how they're like, just watch this one. You can see it's transitioning from one joint to the next joint to the next joint. And you can see how it's doing this very, like, it's traveling one joint, then the next joint, then the next one. And it's just not smooth. It's unfortunate because I think if a mesh deformer was just working, a mesh deformer would be exactly what we wanted here. But it's not. Sadly, it's not working. And as neat as kind of this setup is, I just don't see it. So I don't know. That's what I'm stumped on. Maybe we can try and address it again a little bit. Maybe somebody can have maybe there's more to explore, but as far as I'm concerned, we've kind of run that one. I would like to do one more question just to cleanse the palette, even though we're already over time. Yes, Dean. Yeah, convert spline to joints. Very, very useful. There's a lot of very handy circumstances to do that. Actually, if everybody here doesn't know, check out the character convert menu, because there's a bunch of useful ones. You could convert a spline into a sequence of joints. You could convert a sequence of joints into a spline. You can convert an entire hierarchy into the equivalent nulls, convert a hierarchy from, say, nulls or cubes or whatever into joints. You can convert edges straight to joints, and we can convert joints to become a polygon, that's kind of weird. I haven't done that in a long time. But we could say convert to polygon object, and now we have, let's see if it, yeah, look, it's turned it into geometry. So those are polygons now. So weird, neat. There's actually, I remember when they came out with a tool where you can actually change your bone. This is standard, but you could turn it into a line or a stick, but you can also turn it into a polygon object. And I'm going to delete those polygons. Look how weird this is. Let me grab I got this one right now. I can actually change this to become a polygon object, and now it's a joint, but I can actually like model on it. I think it does like everything. We can do actually the edge selection isn't working super properly, but I wonder if we can subdivide more. Yeah, we can select these edges. I get MF, and let's see if we can actually do a cut there. Yeah, look, we are able to make new geometry on it. So we can possibly do a loop, T for scale, and you could actually model an entire, like if you were modeling these joints, you wanted to, the reason to do this is if you were modeling, sending a character, and it's like, oh, the character is so complex that runs really slow. So you can turn the character off and just see the joints, and you can actually model the joints to be approximately looking like the character. And I mean, you could copy the mesh from the character into the joints and do like a low poly version. There's a reason for it. It's just really weird. And yeah, okay, I can even bevel. Yeah, there's lots of, so it seems like the modeling tools just work on it. So it's neat. It's weird, but yeah, it's so specific. Like it's the kind of thing I wouldn't expect somebody to need to do this unless you're working on like a TV show with the same characters week to week type of thing. So it's like, okay, you actually can do that, but in every other circumstance, that'd be so much work. Chetty question. It's not a riddle. 5 different soldiers, 5 helmets, 5 swords. How to make an army with all possible combinations. That's a fine type of question. Every possible combination. This is actually kind of funny. I recorded a new tutorial yesterday, and we actually had to do something similar. I ended up doing it in I actually made a tool that did this, that we never ended up. I made a prototype of a tool that we never developed at GSG that kind of did something like this. Not exactly, but it's kind of that idea. Every possible combination. There's got to be a real, I'm not even going to save this. This was such a mess. When it comes to this combination stuff, I'm trying to think of, like, how would I do it? Offset. I mean, we can build the simple version of this, which would be, let's make a cube, and we put the cube into a cloner, set this to linear, and let's spread them out a little bit. We'll spread them out 300 units apart. So we'll make 5 of those. So you have 5 cubes, and then you could say that you have, well, you're saying there's 5 different types of cubes. So you actually need to do 5 different colors. I guess it's not too hard to make a couple different colors here. Bloop. Und bloop. Und bloop. Und bloop. So you got different colors. Now we need 5 cubes. 1 with each color. And then you could start doing the same idea. It's like, okay, we do that, and then you would make 5 cubes, except in 5 spheres. We're going to do base this off the visual, so I don't have to copy the materials. I'm going to turn on a fillet and do a full radius, so now we got something that kind of looks like spheres. So you got that. So it's like, okay, we need every possible combination of just these 2 things. So you have to potentially start doing the math of it, which would be, we've got this the cubes. So we have 5, and then there's 5 on the top. So the actual end result will be 5 times 5. That's how many that we'd have to do to get every possible combination. We have to do that count times that count. So now we get that many. Now each of these would need to then get cloned again onto each of those, except we'd have to offset every 5. And that's what I don't know how to do. Because if I say 5 times 5 again, then we get this, but we're just going to keep on getting red, then yellow, then green. Now, this is what we ended up doing yesterday with something kind of unrelated, was if we make a copy of the cloner and I scoot this cloner over, and now all we have to do is take one, we have to take the bottom one and move it to the top. And now you can see that we get the purple-red combination and the red-yellow. So we've done that. And if we copy this again and scoot it over again, and again, I take the bottom and move it to the top, we've now got the blue-red combination. And you just do that. And if I do this, and it's not too hard with this, and you see it, but it's not a very parametric setup. Copy paste again, scoot this over, and do this. And so I've now looped these all the way around. We should now have this should be every possible combination of these two things with no overlap. Like there's no repeats here. There's no blue on purple, and you won't find blue on purple again. It just doesn't exist. Now, if you had another 5, let's just say, there's 5 cones on top of it, it would be 5 times 5 times 5 combinations. And then it would be shooting them, we have another times 5. So we have to like zoom out this far because it happened again and again and again and again. And then it gets to the point where it's like, okay, now we can't do these offsets because it's going to take too long and be very manual. It's a very tricky thing. Yeah, it goes to I bet you there's a very straightforward way of doing this, and I just don't have that method in my head. Like you're saying, there's a sorted method. There could be, how would it happen in Excel? In a spreadsheet. We're not going to push things on spreadsheets too much, but maybe there could be like every possible combination and that type of thing. And it even goes to like, we get these offsets, but you see these offsets are going to travel along it. And that's neat, but it's not actually offsetting the color the way we need it to. And then, it goes to like, there's a formula where you could, if we right now we're driving this via iterating, but if we did it via, honestly, I forget what sort even does. Sort, we're sorting. Is that based on some sort of fall off? Like if I feed this a linear, if we feed a linear field, and what would even be the setting? If I'd make a fall off, make the fall off really long, what parameter would we drive to sort things? Wait to transform? Modify clone? Oh, okay, modify clone. Okay, well, I was right. Yeah, you could modify the clone. So it's now modifying them and sorting them based on that. So yeah, I think this would be potentially some sort of, if we exactly make this fall off exactly the length, then we're going to end up with 5, 5, 5, 5. Actually, I think I eyeballed it and we did get 5, 5, 5, 5. So that sorts them that way. And then, could I copy and paste this again? I'm even going to leave them cubes. We know that it's we don't want them matching is the point here. So if this had its own sort, its own plane, it's doing that. But if I were to grab this and, can we offset? Is there like an offset variable? Maybe inside the linear? Don't think there is. Actually, there might be inside the field. What's it called? It might be noise remap. No. Yes, no. No, that's noise. I don't want noise remap. Although noise remap, the color shift. No. This color has nothing to do with it, so ignore color. There is one of these settings is a thing that I don't have. Is it remap? No. Yeah, no. What is it? No effectors needed. I don't know. Maybe. If you got an example, I don't know. This is just not in my brain. It's one of those just kind of like logic puzzles, and I don't have the solution. But this is a linear. It's applying the values linearly, and there is a way of remapping your values. And I think we could, remap it, but I just can't remember which one of these does it. Well, the offset sort of does. It is a value, but it's not. Yeah, dang. Maybe it was this one. This might do color-based offsets, but the effector isn't based off color. So maybe this was that offset setting right here, I think is the setting I was looking for, but it's inside a colorizer, which I should keep in mind. But it's not going to help us here. Does the curve have an offset? No, it does. Oh. So the curve has it. The curve also has an offset. I've never used it like that, but now we're offsetting. It's not looping. So here, before clamp, I'm going to say loop, and after clamp, loop. So now as we offset, yeah, our plane must be doing things. Yeah, it's offsetting. Don't offset, please. Oh, it's off. It's doing it in this one too. All right, well, that is the setting I was looking for, because if we... I'm trying to make the clean rig. So if we do this offset, so it's 5, it's 20, it's 20, it should be 20% if I'm right. Yeah, 20%, it's 20. I'm going to type in 20% because 20 is, we have 5 copies and 20% is 1/5 of 100%. So now you can see we've got an offset, but this isn't, I offset all of them. It's neat. These are, I was trying to find the setting the other day and I couldn't remember what it was. So it needs, just cancel the short from the top. Yeah, I just don't have this one in my brain. I'm gonna kind of just be thinking about it. I'm finding neat things. I like this. This is incredibly useful. Actually, I got to keep this in mind because this might be really important for other things. Looping a value like this. Oh my god, the applications of this are incredible, like super amazing. And you can ping pong. Oh, it's such a good setting. Oh, okay. Field just became a lot more powerful to me just because this setting right here, because you know how much I love the curve, and that offset's gonna be good. But yeah, I'm doing this still wrong because we can't just offset by 1, because we actually, maybe you would do it by 1 because now it's red, but then the next one we'd have to offset it by as many as there are. But I would super love if somebody puts together a rig and posts it on the Rocket Lasso Slack channel. And if you do, make sure you @ me on it because I want to see what the rig is and just see, like, get that logic in my head. I haven't done that logic before, and I've had to use like code to do that kind of thing before. So if there's a MoGraphy way of doing it, I'd love to see it. I would love to see it. But once again, I don't want to end on that. So let's find another question. Good question, though. Very good question. There is going to be an answer. We just don't know what it is yet. I caught everybody off guard. Okay, Michael jumped in really quick with a question. Last week's question: controlling hair length with a fall off. When you say with a fall off, do you mean using a field? The vertex map method only works when you have a hair generator is set to none. What do you mean? The vertex map method only works when the hair generator is set to none. If we use a flat or a circle, it stops working. I'm intrigued by your question, but you have to word it differently, because when you say hair generator is set to none, I don't know what you mean there. And I don't know what you mean by flat or circle. Oh, actually, no, I suddenly do know what you mean. Okay, let's figure out the hair growth question. So we did that last week. So my thought is you have something like this plane. We are generating hairs, and you're saying that you are generating like flat or triangle or square or circle. So you actually have these. Let's give this a little bit of thickness. Let's go 11 by 11. They're going to be crazy, but we don't need all of those. So let's chill them out by saying as guides. There we go. Now we got a series of cylinders. If we're being real fancy, we can create caps. End cap. Da-da-da. And it's got Fong tag now, so we'll limit the Fong. 45. Okay, so we got a series of cylinders. And you're saying the growth technique from last week wasn't working if we do this. Well, it's entirely possible. So we create that, and I make a point mode selection, set vertex weight, set it to 0. We're doing this a lot lately. Change this to use fields, don't freeze. And I want to control it in the simplest way possible. Just create a spherical field, and you see we get this nice fall off. So based on that nice fall off, we'll go into our vertex map, go into scale, inside of scale, feed it a vertex map. Inside that vertex map, we will drag vertex map shader. We'll drag the vertex map. So now that we've done that, we should be, well, we should get the end result there. But it looks weird. There's already hair scale variation. That's where that's coming from. But we're not seeing the final. But you'd have to render, before we had to render the hairs, I think, to see them. And you're saying that this is not acknowledging it. But I just want to see the equivalent if we set it back to hair. So I'm going to say don't do that. And now we're just seeing the hairs. And we don't see the hairs. Why not? Bump. Okay, there they are. So we do see the hairs, but if we make this into geometry, yeah, put it back to circle, then we get the full shape, and it's not acknowledging the vertex map. And why is, oh yeah, so it's not generating them at all. And we can see here that, yeah, they're just full and not acknowledged. Okay, so, I mean, they transform hair into circles on render at render time. Oh, I see. Oh, actually, that could be important for things I had in the works as well. Okay, well, next bit of plan then. No, yeah, no. Does it work with splines? So that might still render. No, okay. Well, I don't know if these splines are going to be given the correct length. It's really hard to tell. So I'm going to sweep those. What's cool is if you set that to spline, this is now outputting as a spline, which means we can treat it as such. So I'm going to make a sweep and put in an end side. And then you can see that those are being swept. But even here, you can see that the scale does not seem to be getting acknowledged via the vertex map technique. Interesting. Okay, it's good to know that potentially there's this limitation. Potentially there is this limitation on this technique. Yeah, they're going, it's not acknowledging the scale. We can attempt to put it into length. I don't know if that'll make a difference. I kind of doubt it, but let's give it a go. Rink. So length instead of scale. Trigger some sort of refresh. Nope, not acknowledging that either. Yeah, okay. So if a third-party renderer is converting hairs automatically into geometry, and the geometry is not being acknowledged by the vertex map, I mean, that was kind of our only methodology. I can't even think of a way around that using hair. If we're using hair, that is what it is. And feeding the vertex map in was the only way we found a way of translating it at all. Yep, it's true. Is there anything we're missing? I mean, it couldn't get too much more straightforward. We got to fall off. We saw it work with hair. It's not working with the geometry generated from hair. So I'm with you. Local single object. I'm gonna turn off single object. I mean, at this point, I'm just kind of clicking buttons. That's a bad place to be if I don't have an idea of like something we could do. I mean, it just goes to, yeah. I mean, the point here is you want your hair. You want to be able to grow hair in a third-party renderer. Third-party renderer doesn't acknowledge hairs as hairs. They acknowledge them as geometry. When it's geometry, it's not acknowledging our vertex maps to generate growth. So I'm with you. There's kind of a vicious circle right there, but honestly, I cannot think of a way around it. This is not a good workaround because it doesn't fix your hair problem. But if I was trying to recreate what I just had and actually have it work, I wouldn't use hair at all. We would just create a some sort of straight spline. I'm using a helix, which has one more point than we need, but it's parametric. Make a cloner, feed that into the cloner, and clone that onto every point. Point, and aim it up in there. So yeah, oh, that's not the right one. So you get that, and then you could use like whatever now, a plane effector. We don't even need to use vertex maps. You could if you want to do weird growthy things, but plane effector, scale, uniform scale, -1, and that is fed a spherical field, and then we have to invert that. So now spherical field will do it, but now these are individual, these are splines, not hairs. And obviously those are very different things. This will take a lot longer to calculate. I mean, relatively longer. I wonder if you're making hair instances. I mean, you won't be able to get all of the other attributes, which are wonderful from hairs. But if you were to generate all of this like this, if we told this to be a multi-instance, can you sweep it? That's my question. So if we wanted there to be a lot of these, I can go to surface and crank it up, and let's make it 1,000. Yeah, so now there should be quite a few hairs everywhere. Well, cloned splines, and our effects are working on it. Why is it? I'm not sure why the color is changing over there, but I'll think about that later. Oh, and then I wanted to see, okay, so we're generating multi-instance, which means we should be able to make tons of these. But if we feed this to a sweep, it probably won't work out of the box. But let's try. Yeah, sweeping out of the box, that won't work. But if we put that into a connect object, does it work? Bonk. Nope, because it's multi-instance. So this connect is not acknowledging it, but I bet you if we click on the cloner, I'm gonna try render instance, but yeah, that won't work. So let's try regular instance, and I bet it will. So we're back to regular instance. Now that means that, I mean, the cloner is still pretty quick with splines. And let's turn off caps. It'll run a lot quicker if you turn off caps. This is being generated as one object. So actually the sweep will calculate as quick as the hair sweep does. It's just that the clones are what might slow you down. So the, I guess let's just move this around and see how quick it is. I mean, you can see there's a little, it's not full speed. I'm running about 8 frames a second. So not bad for how many little clones we're creating. But it's not hair. Yeah, I'll have to think about that. But I gotta say, I'm not hopeful. If hair doesn't like it, if hair won't acknowledge the vertex maps, then I can't think of any way around that. Michael is also saying that a gradient does work. Could you control a gradient via vertex map? I don't know if you can control, I mean, it depends on your third-party renderer, but could you control, we're saying a gradient, but instead of a gradient, could you just feed it a vertex map? Could you feed your shader a vertex map inside of the third-party renderer? I don't know. Oh yeah, Dean, it's really easy to make hairs render in Redshift. You just throw on a tag and turn on the checkbox, and it can render as like a bunch of different pieces of geometry. But I bet you that they will not work. Actually, we can just do the real test here, which would be we go back to just regular hair and turn off all this extra junk. If we generate our hairs, and you were trying to generate, well, you were trying to generate geometry, but I'm just going to say render as hairs, and let's render none. So now we get our hairs back, and you see if some of those are missing. That's fine. Actually, we need that, so let's de-invert. So now they should only be there. So now let's make this a redshift scene. So we can make a redshift render view and create a redshift material, and you can just throw that directly onto hair. We just throw that right onto the hair, and Redshift typically will acknowledge it. as long as we add a redshift object tag, and under curve, we'll make it one of these. So we can say, yes, they are hair strands. And then we hit go. And you're saying, yeah, you see they don't come through, that the fall off is not coming through. And this fall off is going to the vertex map. The vertex map is being fed in and it's not acknowledging that. So we can also tell it to calculate as cylinders, still not acknowledging it. And yeah, if those two don't work, then none of them will. So I'm with you there. I don't see any additional settings to control that type of thing. These are all hairs, and yeah, a gradient layer with hair material will work as expected. Okay, well, I see what you're saying there, but the vertex, you're saying if we feed a gradient into the hair instead of the vertex map, then that will translate. So let's just visually see that. So if I go into this material, where currently we are feeding, let's not do length, let's do scale. And even here, you should see no, we see the random scale, but if I put that down to 0, no, you see nothing. There, it should all be the same. But you're saying if this was a gradient, it does acknowledge it. Yeah, that's interesting. So it does acknowledge it, but you can't, I mean, this gradient, there's no settings to feed in like a vertex map or anything. The only possible thing I could think of is a vertex map or a proximal, and I don't think that'll work. I'm just going to put in a proximal. We'll see if it acknowledges it at all. Proximal. Well, I mean, it's acknowledging it at 0, 0, 0, but I don't, it's a thing where things often acknowledge a proximal at 0, 0, 0, but it doesn't move. So if I make a null, put that in, and then move the null, yeah, that doesn't update. The color did, strangely, but the movement and the scale does not acknowledge. So that's the only other thing I could think of that could be an object that could be kind of brought in that sort of has that type of information. Nothing else acknowledges a vertex map. Yeah, that might just be something to poke the Redshift developers about. I mean, this kind of thing, we do have, we do have the ability to say like, hey, Maxon, like here's a feature. We really want this working. So we just have to, you just have to make them aware of it. If they don't know that doesn't work, then it's not going to get fixed. So we just have to let them know. So, okay, well, I fully understand the problem, but I don't have a workaround for you. Which is too bad, but thank you for the clarification. And it's a fine question. It's good to know that the process doesn't continue on. Maybe Rick is listening. Sometimes he's in the background listening and he jumps in so he can hear. Yeah, I mean, well, so we just kind of had 2 dead ends, and now this is a third question that's a confident dead end, not a big open-ended question mark dead end. Salam is saying that cycles will work, and that's not surprising. That there's a version that will work in cycles, but cycles, Insidium worked really hard to make cycles integrate into cinema in really great ways. Specifically, all of the X particle stuff, it interacts incredibly well. Let's see. Do we have any other quick questions? Emicore has a question. Let's take a look. I'm going to definitely stop in 15 minutes if we're not already done, but I still have the urge to get something working here. So you said 9 seconds in. It says future. It's Paris Luxury Summit from 17 Mars. It's a brand design agency. Oh, okay. So 17 Mars. So it's pretty long. Lots going on. That's already looking really cool. Rah, it's scary. Snake critter, like a tremor. Okay, so right around here. Okay, okay, so you're on the ferrofluid. You're talking ferrofluids. Ew. Oh, even look at the way that's reacting. Oh, boy. Trying to think of a really good way of doing it. I mean, on a certain level, I mean, there's like real fluid simulation ferrofluid, and there are like people working on algorithms for like actually really making it, like, you know, really making it in 3D. But then there's also the version of it where it's just a point. It's just points that would create that kind of thing. So let me show you the most basic version. Let's set this to. I'm going to make one plane and make a second plane. I'm going to make the second plane have 10 times as many polygons. So we got lots of resolution on this upper one. So if I might not even need to make anything parametric. If we create another, we could use a displacer, but just for fun, let's make a plane. And this plane, actually, even just for fun, let me show you this. It'll be neat. Make it a little fancier. And this is not a dangerous fancy way. I'm going to make a random effector. And the random effector is going to be treated as a point deformer. You see, it's going to go crazy. But I'm going to say, don't go too crazy. Just go up on Y. In fact, I'm going to make sure that it's going up on Y. Actually, that's not Y. It's Z. So Z is always forward. So we can say 50 on Z. And now you see everything's pushing up. As long as I put this to 0, then it should be randomly from 0 up to full power. But if I crank this all the way up, you see it's going to behave exactly like a plane. So this is kind of like a plane. If we pull it up, it's like a plane. But if we pull it down, we actually get this cool variation. So it's kind of like a nice little add-on you can do. So these will just peak with little variations, the reason I did it. Now, currently, everything's coming at full power, but if we go to fall off, we can drag in the first plane as a reference. And the plane is coming in immediately as a point object. So every point is its own little spherical fall off, effectively. And now, because I have the second one very heavily subdivided, it's referencing the lower subdivided one, and we get all these nice even points. So you see we get cone, 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 and they're all generating like that. So that's all pretty straightforward, and it's very interactive. We have a lot of control over the shape of this thing, which is pretty cool. And by that, I mean, if we click on this plane, we can change the radius and make that do whatever we want. But in addition to that, we can go into remapping, and we have control over this curve. So we can turn on contour, curve, and now you see they become smooth, and we can make this very smooth if we were to pull that out a little bit, and you see it's getting more rounded. The randomness is going to be adding variation we don't want right now, so I'll crank it up. Now it's very smooth. So yeah, this is just kind of a way of showing that you do have a lot of control over that type of thing. Having said that, obviously what we're seeing in that is a little bit more dynamic in the fact that they are moving moving around. So what I'm thinking, how do you get tiny ones? Let's see if we can kind of get something working. I'm thinking, what if we particles, clones? Let's do clones. I'm gonna make some cubes, maybe. Yeah, I'll make cubes, put them in a cloner. T for scale them way down, and set to linear, and I want a bunch of copies of this going -20. Boom. So I can go blah, 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 all the way down. Neat. I don't want the random. So we got a bunch of clones traveling down, but it's actual geometry. So then I can grab our cloner and pull it down that little extra bit. I'm going to make it dynamic. So I'm going to say simulation, rigid body. But I'm going to say, hey, cubes, you're not really a cube. You might think you're a cube, but you're actually a sphere or an ellipsoid. So those should now behave like spheres. Now I'm going to turn on gravity. I'm going to go to our dynamic settings and go to gravity and say negative gravity. So they're going upward. And now that they're going upward, we want them to collide with something. And what we want them to collide with is this low poly floor. I mean, if we're being super clean, I could make a floor and you have to flip it around 180 degrees. So it's aiming down. So we have like a negative gravity floor, and that can now become dynamic. It's probably the best way to do it. So turn that off. So now we have a bunch of these that should be falling upward and piling up and rolling around as if they are spheres. So cool. Now we have very direct control. It could also be a particle emitter. We can make a bunch of these. And I don't want them to shoot out really quickly, so I'm going to drain their energy a lot. Friction won't help, but we could... we don't need them to bounce, but a little bit of, or maybe a lot of bit of damping, linear and angular, will make these... yeah, kind of pile up a little bit like that. Yeah, that's what we're going for. So jump this up to 999. So let those keep falling. And they should hopefully kind of pile up really nicely and kind of be pushing each other out of the way. But because we're draining the energy out, they're being treated like spheres, even though we're seeing cubes. You see how they're really eating up their space quite nicely. So now we just need to control the radius a bit. So those are a little small. I'm going to scale them up, and you see it's going to just kind of scale everything. So we're getting more space. How big is our plane? I kind of lost it. Okay, now we're kind of eating up the overall size of the plane. So if we save the file, because we're getting dynamic here, getting dynamical. Farah type thing. Now we make our random. Currently is acknowledging the plane as some sort of fall off to play with, but we don't want that anymore. Let's delete that. We already knew what it was doing. Instead, let's drag in the cloner. I'm going to say bring in the cloner, and I think I can say as a MoGraph object because we just want the radius. I'm not sure though. Let's let that hit. And is it going to acknowledge it the way I want it to? Seemingly not. So the radius, is it coming? It's coming as a MoGraph object. I don't even know what that means, to tell you the truth. Nearest. Let's do a maximum. Well, there's a radius, but I'm still not seeing an effect. I think we should be seeing an effect. So I'm going to say you are not a cloner. You are being brought in as a point object. Yeah. Yeah. Look at that. So now each of these, okay. So those are all running dynamically, which is fine. But now we need to, we don't want all 4 points because right now it's going to calculate 4 points for every single one. We don't want that. So I'm going to make a matrix object. And the matrix object is going to reference the object that is the cloner. And it's going to reference the axis. So it's making exactly 1 for the center of each of those cubes. So with that in mind, let's not feed this random effector. Let's not feed this random effector that cloner. Let's feed it the matrix object. And now we can bring that in as a point object. And now it should just be viewing each one of those as a single point. That's what I thought, but these, I made them bigger, so we need more spacing. Which is why they exploded. Whee! Bunk, 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 bunk. But the matrix is not doing a good job of more than 1 point because it must just be seeing the axis. So matrix needs to come in as a MoGraph object, maybe? Oh, come on, MoGraph object. Don't let me down. I thought that would work, but I mean, we're not. Well, let's try the mode max. Yeah, see, the radius isn't doing it. I don't know what this number means. Average, no. Index, no. Distribution, yeah, how disappointing. Nearest max. Play, nope. Min, no. Average, no. Okay, matrix, you're not gonna help out. So I wonder, clones, you can't. Or you could treat it as a thinking particle. That'd be weird. Weird and interesting. In the random, can we treat this as a particle object? Oh, just still point object. And that's not going to work. I don't think those will refresh still. No. There's still potentially hope with this matrix. I feel like there might be a couple different paths we could go. I can think of other paths, but the matrix is not. It wants a thinking particle group, which is kind of a throwback, but let's make one. So it's probably under simulate, thinking particles, thinking particle group. We don't need a subgroup, so I'm going to say, yes, you are. Wait. Why is it? Oh, that's thinking particle geometry. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. So I'm sorry. We are supposed to go into thinking particles TP settings and make a group. Add a group. So we got group 1. That is what that will become. Now, can we feed? Does that change anything by itself? I doubt it, but it's always worth checking. No. But can we, in this, feed it a thingy particle group directly? Did it accept it? Oh boy. Okay. I didn't know if that would work, and it did. So now we're saying, okay, Matrix, you are doing whatever that cloner says you should do. And now it's got a thinking particle group. And now I drag that group into the random effector directly, and that is indeed acknowledging it. And now you can see that we've got these individual little particle things, and we have control over the radius and how those should combine with each other. And we have the remapping, so we could change the curvature of the way that those are going to meet with each other as well. So we could, make them pointier or less. But now we kind of got that ferrofluid look. We can push the displacement more, so we can say that goes up like 100. Make it a little spikier. So let's see what we get now. Excellent. That's actually working quite nicely. And now you can see how it's making new ones in the center point and pushing them out. So with that working, actually better than I thought it would. Let's see if we can push the random a little bit further by giving it things like spring. Let's go delay spring. I don't know if that will work, but let's see. Oh, it does. Look. Oh, yeah, nailed it. Awesome. Okay, this is exactly what I was hoping we could get, and it's working. So you can see that these are coming in now as a springy thing, so they can actually overshoot, which by itself is really cool. The radius is being determined by whatever we make that original cube that we were making a bunch of clones of. And so, they should bunch up really nicely. We could even make attractors so that they're really pulling on top of each other, and they could even stack in more interesting ways. And even here, we can fill up a surface, and we could make these being attracted to a surface. Right now we did the simple version on a plane, but these could be on a sphere, being attracted to the surface of a sphere, and each of these will pop up and go blip, 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 blip. They are spheres, but we could make them bouncier. We could make them have more friction, so they're less likely to slide away. We could add we don't want them escaping, and they will escape. So let's make a box, and I'm going to make it editable. Select the top polygon, grow my selection, invert my selection, delete the bottom polygon, hide this, take the tag from the floor and make it dynamic, and then say that this should be a static mesh, and that should just mean they can't escape. And the reason I did that is because I'm going to make this... I'm going to add turbulence. Really simple. Forces, turbulence. And make a turbulence 55, perhaps. Give it a little scale. There we go. Now, some of those might escape. Yeah, they're going to escape too early, so we need the box I made to be really tall. Select the top, convert UI, select the points down there, add a couple zeros to how negative it is. And now they should be super trapped. So now we got turbulence, and these should be... I'm going to hide the matrix because we don't need to see that. We also don't need to see the original cloner. And now we've got a full-on flow of ferrofluid, essentially. That's actually some of the best ferrofluid I've made. The springiness is leaving those little trails. So you got to be careful with how springy you want them to be. Yeah, keep in mind that springiness. But then... even on top of that, so that's using some springiness, but we could, let's try, actually that's springiness, but let's try what happens if we make it smooth. I'm just curious. So I say smooth. Ooh, look at that. Now they get these little tails. But they're still going to fade up a little more slowly. So you get these tails. And then, the tails kind of steal away the thunder, but I was going to also put a decay. And the decay will give them tails as well. Ferrofluid tails, which is going away from the ferrofluid effect, but just an independent thing that's kind of neat. I still think it looked really cool with springiness. We just might need the springiness to be a little lessened, or potentially unclamping and letting them bounce off of each other. Yeah, that's pretty good ferrofluid. Oh, unclamp, they go negative now. That's funny. Let's see. Any could be used to make sharks. let's see. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, everybody's happy that we were able to make this work, and I mean, it's I think it's pretty great Ferrofluid. I like it. And then we're subdividing this quite a bit, but we could have made this lower poly potentially, and just do subdivisions afterward. I don't know. I think there's more you could do, but I would need like a specific oh, here's what we should try and do with it. So, and that's something maybe to do next week. If somebody can think of a cool follow-up to this, then we can potentially do that. But we've now successfully completed a 3-hour stream. I'm happy that we were able to make something really cool here at the end. I'm wondering the possibilities here. I'm kind of blown away that thinking particles can be fed as a raw source, and it works really well. I mean, this entire thing could just be a full-on particle system. We don't need these to be dynamic clones. It's just a way of doing it in vanilla cinema. These could be thinking particles that stick on the surface and avoid each other. So there's a lot of like possibilities you could go and drive with that. But yeah, the ability to make these all dynamic and roll around and bounce off each other. So it's just their natural radius, which is really cool. The natural radius of our dynamics here are what are making sure that they don't intersect with each other, which is really neat. Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. So yeah, we'll save that one as a successful ending here. Actually, I guess before we end, why don't we just add a nice material on there? Because we have our nice viewport. Why not make it look like some sort of metallic? It should be as simple as killing the color channel, going to reflection channel. No specular, please, but I will take some of your finest GGX. Crank up the reflection strength. Nice and shiny, and actually it should be not terribly reflective. Is it low? Yeah, okay, there we go. Or actually, I guess we just want some Fresnel in there. Crank it, and then I don't know, Ferrofluid. I guess it probably is more of a conductor, so it's more of a metallic. And I guess it's probably got iron inside of it, so we'll do an iron, and then we pull that back. Yeah, something like that, I guess. And then get it right in the viewport. Bling, 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 bling. Lovely. I wonder if you could do different scale particles. I'm not sure if that information comes through in MoGraph. That'd be interesting. Might be like different sizes if that were the case. I guess it's trivial to check it. If we just grab our original cloner, add a random effector, and affect the scale uniformly, but we'll do quite a bit. And then if that translates all the way through, we'd see different size spikes. Oh, goodness, we do. Okay, well, simple as that. We can have different scale spheres rolling around. The different scale spheres translate to different scale matrices. The matrix translates into different scale thinking particles, and then that actually translates into different scales in for the spikes. So yeah, all of that just automatically translates, and that means that we have the ability to change dynamically and through MoGraph change the scale of these as they go, so they could get bigger and smaller, less spiky, more spiky. I can just turn off at any given point. I can just turn off this random effector, and then suddenly they're all going to drop to their size, and then spike up, spike down, spike up, spike up. Just another easy way of art directing it. I don't know. Maybe this could be a full tutorial of some sort. I like it. It's fun. And people are always super fascinated by Ferrofluid. I mean, I love the stuff. I mean, I wish it's really expensive. I didn't buy any, but I do have a bunch of iron filings. I like magnet stuff. Okay, well, we are going to wrap this up, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out. It is deeply appreciated. I couldn't do it without without the questions. I can't answer a question without getting a question. In addition to that, I do have a Patreon set up. If you sign scene files in here and you learn like me, I like learning by reverse engineering. So seeing what somebody else made and dissecting it and then extracting what I want out of it. So you can get the scene files on Patreon. It's also just a great way of supporting the stream and the tutorials. In addition to that, I have 2 bonus live streams that I do every week. I just started a brand new one a week ago. So we did episode 2 yesterday. Let me just lay it out. The older bonus stream comes on Thursday, and the Thursday stream is kind of taking some of the ideas maybe that we had today and trying to go deeper on it. But I don't like spending too much time if we're dead ending here. So on the bonus stream, we can go deeper and we do research and look into things a little bit deeper and try and figure it out. The idea of the Tuesday stream is it is Tutorial Tuesday, and I try and record a brand new tutorial during the stream, and the streams are like 5 hours long. It's crazy. But we did record tutorial number 2 yesterday, and I'm actually quite happy with it. Should be fun. I'm not going to mention it yet, but it'll come out on Tuesday on Patreon early. People get tutorials for a week early on Patreon, and then it'll be live to the world in 2 weeks. But that is the plan. Also, super duper important, there's a Slack channel, Rocket Lasso Slack. If you go to rocketlassoslack.com, you can sign up, join the community. All the same people hanging out in the chat tend to be the same people who are hanging out on the Slack channel, asking questions, answering questions, doing group projects, lots of fun stuff. So you should definitely come and check that out if this seems like the kind of thing you want to continue the conversation on. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye, everybody. Toodaloo. Adios.